Jay Crawford, Adam the Bull, Garrett Bush, and so many big names, it would take me hours to say all of their names. The ultimate Cleveland sports show. Booyah!
There's no stopping Jim Brown into the end zone for his 5th touchdown of the day.
Activist, actor, and titan of the gridiron, Jim Brown, has died. Born James Nathaniel Brown in 1936, St. Simons, Georgia, Brown was a force to be reckoned with on the field, revolutionizing the role of the running back. Selected in the first round of the 1957 draft, Brown played 9 seasons for the Cleveland Browns and led the league in rushing 8 of those years. He led the Browns to the league championship game 3 times, winning the title in 1964 and was named MVP 3 times. Post-football, Brown transitioned seamlessly into the world of acting, showcasing his talents in films such as The Dirty Dozen, Ice Station Zebra, and 100 Rifles.
I wanted to have a career, have it peak, and do other things.
Beyond his athletic prowess and film career, he stood tall as an advocate for civil rights, using his platform to fight for equality and justice. We remember one of the greatest to ever play, Jim Brown.
And we'll be remembering the great Jim Brown throughout the 2-hour program today. Of course, he passed late Thursday night at his L.A. home at 87 years old. One of the greatest, not just running backs of all time, but one of the greatest football players ever to play the sport. Dead at the age of 87. And really, much of what the Browns fandom is today, you can point back to Jim Brown. Obviously, there were other great players that came before him, but his popularity came at a time when football was really still in its infancy in the United States, and he really was that true great player for a decade. And we'll, as I said, we'll be remembering his life and his career throughout the program. Welcome to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Bull, good to be with you again.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yes, it has.
Bug.
You know I'm back. I'm home. This
Back,
is my seat.
back in the seat.
I actually moved the seat closer. I'm making my way, Jay.
I know you are. He's coming. He's moving his way to the left. G. Bush actually is emceeing the opening of the High School Football Hall of Fame. This is in Canton, Ohio. I'm not sure if it's affiliated with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but McNuggets, you said the founder of this is going to be in tomorrow on the show?
Yeah, the founder is actually G. Bush's high school coach, Antonio
cool
Hall,
okay.
at Canton McKinley, and he will be on the show tomorrow
Very good.
at 11:30. So all those questions,
Yeah.
we don't know the
We'll
answer
hold our
to
fire
right
for
now.
him.
We'll get
Earl
them
is
tomorrow.
down there with
Yeah.
him, too.
Oh, G. Bush went to McKinley?
Yeah, he did.
Because that's where I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's the school right there where we practice at. I didn't know that.
National champion one year.
2 times.
Before he went to Ohio.
Yeah.
Was he there both national
believe
championship
so.
years?
Yeah.
Wow.
They keep losing to Massillon, though.
Well, they're not good now.
Because
Yeah,
in the weight room, usually you have like a time clock that says like when the season is going to start.
Yeah, ticking
but
down.
Theirs is ticking down. I thought that's what it was, but when I looked closer, it's like, oh, to only beat Massillon, I'm like, oh, they're rivals. And then they have papers next to the ticker, and they've lost like 9 in a row. I'm like, what?
That hurts.
Yeah. So
not
you
much of a
trained
rivalry.
at the same high school where G. Bush plays. You guys are
Yeah, we
connected,
use their facilities.
I didn't know that. I
Every
wonder
day.
if G knows that.
Nah, he must not because he hasn't mentioned it. So
Yeah, and you haven't talked to him about it. Yeah, he's a Bulldog for sure.
What a blessing.
Lot to get to today, obviously, on the death of Jim Brown. Leroy Hoard in that same fraternity as Jim Brown, as Brown's running back. He's going to join us coming up later in the program, the end of the first hour, and he'll give us his remembrances and thoughts and what Jim Brown meant to him, you know, how he mentored him, what advice he gave to Leroy. That's going to be an interesting part of the show coming up about 45 minutes from right now. And you can see the new little text the show down at the bottom there. You can get all your daily updates. Also, we're going to do some viewer comments later, correct?
Yeah, we asked the internet, you know, what was your favorite Jim Brown memory,
Yeah.
and what do you remember most? And we got some pretty good answers. We got a ton, so we're not going to get to all of them, but
Right.
we'll sort through. We picked a couple of our favorites.
Very good.
And we'll do that towards the end of the show.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of you have thoughts, remembrances, things that you'd like to share, and we'll get to that. Bulls bet.
Yeah, we'll get to that real quick. I went 1-1 on Friday.
Okay.
I finally hit my first baseball slump here. I think I've lost 4 of 7 or something like that,
You're
Mike.
2
I
and
don't know.
5 in your last 7, so.
Oh,
It's all right. You're still
Thank
over
you,
500 in
McNuggets.
baseball.
Still
right?
way over 500.
Yeah, 10
yes,
over.
but
I need some locks tonight.
all
Please.
right. Well, I got
Some
one
locks.
game today. let's bring it up there, Mikey.
Yeah, before we bring it up, though, let's remind the good people where
Yeah.
they should be betting if they're going to ride with Bull on his bet of the day, and that
Right.
is Bet Rivers Online Sportsbook. Right now is the perfect time to join Bet Rivers Sportsbook when you use deposit code SPORTS. You receive a second chance bet up to $500. Get in on all the action with weekly specials on your favorite sports like basketball and hockey. To help you win big, check them out at BetRivers.com. Download the BetRivers app today for the latest lines, odds, and boosts.
By the way, I was thinking about going against the A's today, but they are such a big underdog that even minus 1.5 runs against them, they were still like minus 170.
I still bet it.
I wonder
even
if
with a
has
run and a
Vegas
half.
finally caught on that they're going to be an all-time worst team.
We might have to have like minus 2. Well, yeah, I mean, if they lose their next two, they'll be 10 and. I mean, they're 10 and 38 right now.
Good Lord.
They're going to break. I think they're going to break that Mets record of 40 and 120.
1962.
Yeah, and that was an expansion team.
Expansion Mets.
Yeah,
Tim Kirkson said he didn't think they were that bad, though.
he
said they were
did.
bad. He did not. He said he did not think.
We'll
they would
see.
break
I
the
don't-
Jim probably remembers the 62 Mets.
I just seen an article. They reached the all-time low in attendance at 2000.
Oh, my God.
they were
Fans
like
have just
2000
stopped coming.
The fans are just boycotting now because you know they're up and leaving and moving to
going to
Las
Vegas.
Vegas, so
Yeah.
the fans are upset. I feel so bad for the town of Oakland. You know, such
It's terrible.
passionate fan base, and just to see what have happened to them for over these past
They've
5
lost
years.
all three of their
losing all
teams. It's going to be in the
teams,
span of like 5 years.
Yeah.
Essentially.
in a place where sports mean a lot to those kids and people growing up. Sports keep things kind of together. So
and
I'm
are
just
good
kinda-
fans.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the Raiders fan base. That fan
huge.
base was incredible.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
epitomize
The Warriors home games at Oracle were unbelievable.
Yeah, and the A's haven't had good attendance for a while, but that stadium is so awful, and the
worst in
team's been
sports,
bad
I
for a
think.
while.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think the A's were kind of considered in that same vein with the Rays and the Guardians.
Yeah.
And now they've gone in the last like half decade. They've gone way
been a
away.
nightmare.
I mean,
Do
they
you see
stink. They're terrible.
Yeah.
Any team coming in and like them getting a professional sports team is this done?
I think Oakland, the
Oakland's
ship
done.
has sailed for
Yeah,
pro
yeah.
sports in Oakland.
No, they need a new
For
stadium.
starters, the city treats the team like crap. They refuse to help them with new stadiums. The Raiders, Vegas made it easy for the Raiders,
Yeah.
but the Oakland did nothing to try to keep them. Golden State jumping across to San Francisco. I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of a no-brainer
Yeah.
with just with the finances. And unlike the other sports, like in baseball and football, San Francisco already had their own team. So it was, it was
Right.
A
just
no-brainer.
a little
Yeah.
bit different.
Gotcha.
But and what's weird too is their fans are diehard, very good baseball fans. In the 70s,
Yeah.
they
It was
were
huge.
they were
Yeah,
juggernaut
yeah.
in the
Right.
early 70s with Charlie Finley as their owner.
Well, and even into
In the
the
90s
80s,
they had a
90s
run.
with Canseco and McGuire,
Yeah.
and then, But anyway, did we put up the bet, Mike?
Not yet. We're waiting for you
Oh,
guys.
go ahead.
let's
Just
show
throw
it.
up. Yeah, the Tigers. I like the Tigers at the Royals. It's basically a pick'em game. The Tigers, first of all, we all know the AL Central is one of the worst divisions I've ever seen. The Guardians just keep on losing, and they're not really that far out.
No.
But the Tigers quietly have played pretty well since a bad start.
Are they ahead of the Guardians now?
They are.
Yeah, I thought so.
They are. The Royals are the worst of the bunch. And the Tigers have a pitcher named Michael Lorenzen who came off the injured list a couple weeks ago. And his last 3 starts, including one against the Guardians, have been lights out.
He looked great against us.
Yes, he was great. So, he's pitching great, and he's facing the Royals.
Yeah,
It's a pick'em game. I think I like the Tigers tonight.
I might take the line on the complete game shutout.
Yeah. You
Yeah, it's
could.
been rough for the Guardians. We're going to talk about that.
I'm rocking with you, Bull.
A little
I'm,
bit
I'm
later.
rocking, I'm rocking with
I
you.
like it. I
Yeah,
like it.
good. All right,
Get
roll
back
on, roll the
track.
dice
Here we
and
go.
win. Okay, let's dive in. And obviously, we've had a lot of time now to think about
Yeah.
it because he passed. We got news of the passing Friday afternoon. He
Right.
passed Thursday night.
Jay, you said something a moment ago
Yeah.
that Jim Brown is the Browns, essentially.
Yeah.
When you think about it, like, we always talk about the fact that not just in Cleveland, people root for the Browns. That's obvious. It's Cleveland.
Yeah.
But around the country, the reason there are so many Browns fans, there's 2 reasons why there's a lot of Browns fans that are 60 and older all around the country. Those 2 reasons are Paul Brown and Jim Brown.
You're absolutely
That's
right.
it.
That is it.
That's the list,
Yeah.
right? And my dad was a Browns fan because he loved Paul Brown and he loved Jim Brown. And then when they were gone, he was angry, and a lot of people were angry. But the reason there are so many 60 and 70 and 80-year-olds in all over the country and all over the world is Paul Brown and Jim Brown. They are, to this day, to some degree, Jim Brown is still the face of the franchise.
Well, my dad, he made this up, obviously, but when you're a kid, you want to know everything. Why are they the Indians? Why are they the Browns?
Yeah.
And my dad's answer, and by the way, my dad loved Paul Brown and Jim Brown.
Yeah.
Jim Brown was his favorite player all time any sport. Paul Brown was his favorite coach all time any sport. And he said, well, they're the Browns because of Paul Brown and Jim Brown. Yeah. They're the Browns.
Yeah.
And I thought that was true forever.
It made sense.
Because he just explained it so succinctly. I'm like, oh, well, they weren't the Browns before that? And he said, they made them the Browns. And that really sums it up, Bo. That's
it's true.
why.
It really is.
When I've worked around the country and I've lived in different areas, I've always fell into pockets of Browns fans because there's a Browns backers bar in just about every major city. I would always find it.
Yeah.
And when I would go and I would talk to the people, my story is very similar to how you're a Bengals fan, okay? The stories that I would hear would be, well, God, the Browns were really good when my dad was young, that was his favorite team, so I started rooting for the Browns. And so really, Paul Brown was huge in all of that, but I think he was the seed. I think the oak tree was Jim.
No doubt.
I really do. He was, when you look at his stats, and we're going to have this debate later as to whether or not he's the best running back of all time. And obviously, if you just watch the film and you see today's backs do so much more in terms of pass catching and everything else, but the apples to apples comparison and the number that I always use for everyone is, of all the backs, all the great backs, the O.J. Simpsons, the Emmitt Smiths, all of them, only one averaged 100 yards per game, which really is the yardstick for a great game. He was it. He did it for a career. And as many great backs as we've seen, Walter Peyton, all of these great backs, no one's been able to do that.
And near the top of all time in terms of yards per carry.
I think he's third.
Yeah, I mean he's
number 3.
Over
number
5
3.
yards a carry.
I mean the number, you think about his last. So he played 9 years in the NFL, right? His last year when he retired, he went and did the Dirty Dozen, which I love that movie.
This is my favorite stat, by the way, where you're going.
His last year, he led the league in yards. He led the league in carries. He led the league in touchdowns. I mean, he had 21 touchdowns in his last year at 29 years old.
Just to show you the dominance.
Yeah.
You can go back and look at the rushing title every year in the NFL.
Yeah.
And there are a few exceptions, obviously. I think the year that the old Rams running back that went over 2,000.
Eric Dickerson.
Eric Dickerson.
Yeah.
There are years where you'll find big gaps between 1 and 2. But in 1964, his last season, Jim Brown ran for, or 65, or I think it was 65.
I think it was 65. I think
65.
You're right. Yeah.
He ran for 1,544 yards in 14 games. Gale Sayers was second. He had 677 more yards than Gale Sayers. He damn near doubled Gale Sayers' numbers.
Know. That's just crazy.
And that was and that was the last time we saw him play.
He could have sat out the last 5 games and he still might have led the league. I think he probably would have led the league in rushing.
I'm sure he would have.
If he missed 5 games.
I'm sure, which is just insane.
Yeah.
Now, I remember, I think it was 84.
Yeah.
Maybe you can help me on this, McNuggets, because I know you'd find a picture of it online somewhere. He announced he was coming back. And he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in a Raiders jersey. And I thought, oh my God, is this real? And he really was trying a comeback. Now, it obviously didn't make it.
Right,
and,
right.
You know, in the NFL, you're old at 30 as a running back.
Yeah, he was
and he
50,
retired,
right?
I think, at 31. But, you know, I mean, by then I think he was 47 years old. It was something absurd like that.
Oh, yeah, that's ridiculous.
And he was you can find it. There's a picture of Jim Brown on the cover of Sports Illustrated in a Raiders uniform.
The title of that article, by the way, is Jim Brown, a comeback at 47. Are you serious?
Yeah. There you go.
His presence and what he's done for this game is unmatched because he's way before my time. And growing up, when you thought of the Cleveland Browns, you thought of Jim Brown. You know, there are certain
L.A.
There are certain people in certain organizations that when you think of that organization, you think of a specific player. You think of the Boston Celtics, my mind, even though before my time, you think of Larry Bird.
Right.
You think of Magic Johnson. Nowadays, you think of Kobe Bryant.
Right.
When you think of the Cleveland Browns, because of they haven't had much success, you think of Jim Brown, because he is the last person to help them win an NFL championship, even though it was because of before the AFL and NFL merger.
Right.
In 1970, 1964, he's brought Cleveland their last championship. And this passionate fan base, that's all you hear is Jim Brown. And the way people speak about him, that's how, if you haven't met somebody, the way other people talk about them and their experiences and their relationship with them is how you can tell how a person is. And I've heard nothing but great things. You know, Barack Obama sent his condolences to the Brown family and things like that. And just many legends of the game have sent their condolences. So that just shows me he was an amazing person. He's paved the way for people like myself to continue to play this great game. And I just feel for his family in this untimely passing. And
we kind of felt something was close because at the NFL awards in January or February, it was right before the Super Bowl, Joe Thomas was the first player to be announced into the new class at the All-Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the way it worked was a great from that organization
usually comes in,
announced the player. Mm-hmm. And they had Tim Brown announce Joe Thomas.
Right.
And Jim Brown was in the audience. Yeah. And at that point, I thought,
something's going on.
Yeah, something must be, he must be unable to move up there. And he didn't look well. They showed him a couple of times during the ceremony. He did not look well at all. But I interviewed him 2 or 3 years ago. Now, I can't remember. It was a couple of years ago. And even though he moved slowly, anytime you saw him move, you could tell he walked with a limp and he used a cane. But by and large, he was still sharp as a tack. He was telling me details from the championship game, which was, 55 years earlier.
Yeah.
And he was remembering specifics and things about his childhood, too. And he was just a wealth of information. Yeah. And now, Bull, I feel like, every organization has a walking history book.
Yeah.
I think for the Browns, we've lost that link to that great history.
Yeah.
Now that Jim Brown is gone.
Well, it's amazing when Boogie was talking about like guys that you think of with teams. Most of those guys have played much more recently than Jim Brown.
Right.
And just we haven't had that player. I mean, there's guys that you think about with the Browns, but not like Jim Brown.
Who is the Bengals guy, by the way? Who is when you?
I guess for me, the first guy I think about is Anthony Munoz.
Oh, interesting.
That's the first guy that comes to me.
I think Boomer Esiason.
But Boomer too.
Just probably played a more
higher profile position.
Yeah.
But I think Munoz was the greatest Bengal ever, so that's why I pick him. But but the thing about Jim Brown also, we talk about this with LeBron. Like it feels like LeBron, if he had gone into any sport, would have been great. Right. Like if he had concentrated on soccer or baseball, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just, it feels like the same thing with Jim Brown, right? Like Jim Brown was a legendary lacrosse player. He held records in high school basketball. I didn't even know this until recently. I didn't realize he was that good a basketball player in high school. Like I'm sure he was probably great at anything he did. And you don't find, like, there's guys who are great at their sport, but it's the rare athletes, the Bo Jackson, the LeBron James, the Jim Brown, Dave Winfield, that can excel in any sport, it seems.
I think that's a great point because we all remember that guy from our high school.
Yeah.
The guy from our graduating class, that whatever he tried, he wasn't just good, he was the best player on the team.
Right.
And one of the things that the Browns sent out on Friday, 32 facts about 32. And I read through them, and I knew a lot of them. There were some that were surprises to me. But the one that really jumped off the page to me, because I don't even know how you do this, he earned 13 varsity letters. Now, if he was 4 years in high school,
right,
and there's 3 seasons,
right.
If you letter in all 4 sports or all 3 seasons,
right,
for 4, that gives you 12 varsity letters. He lettered in football, lacrosse, baseball, basketball, and track.
So he had to be playing doing 2 sports at one time.
He played baseball and track at the same time in the spring. He played football and lacrosse in the fall. And I remember when I did the interview with him, asking him specifically about what did you do as a kid if not this? And he said, listen, I was so into it. I built a high jump pit in my backyard so I could practice track and field. Wow. And I had asked him, if you had gone into another sport, if you had just decided it was going to be baseball, there was no pro lacrosse, many consider him the greatest lacrosse player ever.
Yes.
And when I asked him that in the interview, I said, what do you say to the fact that some call you the greatest lacrosse player ever? Thank you. That's it. That's all he said.
That's the most humblest response ever.
And you know what? It was like the mic drop response.
Yeah.
He didn't for a second try to say, oh, that's high praise, but there are so many better than me. When he played, he was the gold standard of the sport.
Yeah.
And so he said, not only was I playing these sports organized, when I was home, I was practicing these sports. I was practicing all 10 events of the decathlon because he wanted to be an Olympic decathlete, gold medalist. Mm-hmm. So, Bull, you're absolutely right. He was just that guy that was gifted with unbelievable athleticism and really managed to conquer everything he tried to do in his life.
And think about it, like he's playing at a time where certainly not everybody, but a lot of the people voting in these awards, there's still racism. He's dealing with the civil rights off the field, but even just on the field, like there's going to be guys that won't vote for him for these certain things, especially in certain parts of the country. And yet he just won everything.
Going away.
You look at the lists of awards and accomplishments, it's just like, it's absurd.
It really is. Mikey, you want to do a read quick?
Yeah, I want one read, and then I got to mention something from the 32 Facts About 32. But today's show, and in honor of Jim Brown, everything we talked today, Browns, is brought to us by Lorain County Community College. Your class is your future. You can register now for summer and fall classes. Learn more at loraincc.edu to learn more. On that list of 32 fun facts they sent out about Jim Brown, Jay, the one that stood out to me the most, he didn't miss a single game in 9 years. I guess I just didn't realize the pure durability of that.
Wow.
But
now, for some of those years, they played 12 games.
Mm-hmm.
And some were 14.
Some were 14. But still,
led the league in carries, led the league in rushing 8 out of his 9 years, was first team All-Pro 8 of the 9, and second team the 1 year he wasn't first. To take that kind of abuse on the football field, and Boogie could speak to it, I mean, running backs in today's day and age, their average career is a year and a half, 2 years, because they're getting absolutely demolished by defensive linemen. I know it was a little different back in the 60s, but to never miss a game in 9 years, that stood out to me more than anything.
Also, you have to take into account, too, how he ran. Yeah. Jim Brown could do one of 3 things. I remember my dad telling me this one, because I'd never seen him play. I just saw the films. But I said, Dad, what kind of player was he? And he said, the most versatile player I'd ever seen. And I said, why? And he said, he could run through you, he could run around you, he could run by you. And he usually did all 3 every series that he touched the ball. It just would rotate. Yeah. He would size up the competition, and if he thought it was a defensive back that he could drop his shoulder and run over, he would. If it was a linebacker who he felt had a beat on him, he'd make a miss. And if it was corner or something trying to chase him down, he would just run by him. And it was when you watch the old films, the thing that immediately stands out is his size, his strength, and his speed.
Yeah, no doubt. And to your point, Jay, I saw this quote earlier, so I just wanted to bring it back up because I want to make sure. John Mackey, who played at Syracuse after Jim Brown, and Jim Brown, like a lot of younger running backs, Ernie Davis, mentored the running backs that came through Syracuse, especially through Syracuse. John Mackey was talking about Jim Brown. I don't know when. Oh, this was in 1999. He said, Jim Brown told me, quote, make sure when anyone tackles you, he remembers how much it hurts.
Wow.
He lived by that philosophy, and I always followed that advice. So you think of a running back taking the hit from the linebacker or the defensive lineman, and they're the one that's feeling the pain. Jim Brown's philosophy was, you're going to tackle me, it's going to hurt you.
And he did run that way. He was a punishing running back.
Yes.
The one thing that my dad always used to tell me, too, is that he said after every play, he thought, this is it. He's not going to get up this time. Because he would be so slow, and he would just meander back to the line, and he would hold his legs, and he would limp, and he would walk, and it would take forever. And he said the ball was snapped, and it was like he got hit by lightning. Boom, right now.
Yeah.
And he was gone, But he said it was all kind of like his demeanor was slow moving. And you know who does that sometimes, too, is Nick Chubb kind of reminds me of that. Nick can move slowly at times on his way getting up and back to the huddle, but once the ball is snapped, he's all fire.
Yeah.
And that's the way Jim Brown ran for his 9 years. He was, we're going to get into this later about the greatest of all time, so I won't go too deeply into it here. But there is no real, I don't know if there's a GOAT argument, except for maybe Serena, where there's really like no conversation.
Yeah.
There's a conversation.
Michael Phelps. That's a different sport.
Yeah, but even since Michael Phelps, his records now are mostly broken.
That shows how little I know about swimming.
Like
I
Mark
have no idea.
Mark Spitz at the time was the GOAT. He won 7-1 games, and then Michael Phelps came along, and you're probably right. I mean, to dominate as many different disciplines, because swimming's got so many different races.
Yeah.
So Phelps might be in that conversation with Serena, but for a while, and now it's different, but even into the early 80s, that debate was short and sweet.
Yeah. Right.
OJ changed it a little bit, I think, because there were some that thought at the time that what OJ was doing was better than what Jim Brown had done. But I still think that, there's no clear-cut GOAT. Some guy could say, one player, another could say this. But if you talk about the greatest football player ever, he's even in that conversation. Not just the greatest running back, but he's really got to be considered, because when you look at what he did, even though it was a short for 9 years, he was the best at that position unquestionably for his entire career. No fall off at all.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before. 8 out of his 9 years, he led the league in rushing. 7 out of 9 years, he had over 1,000 yards. Again, not a 16 or 17 game season. 12 or 14.
Yeah.
And he only was under 1,000 yards his rookie season, and then the year he didn't lead the league in rushing at 900-something yards.
He still won MVP as a rookie without 1,000 yards.
Right.
It's amazing.
And he was all pro 8 out of 9 years. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's crazy. You wonder, had he played now.
Look at his size, Bull. Look at that picture.
Especially for that
Boogie,
time.
can you imagine squaring up with that?
I would not want to tackle him. And then, like you mentioned earlier, he was the ultimate triple threat back. To be that size, to be that elusive, and can run by you is just terrifying for a defense. Nowadays, you get one of the three. You either get a big power back, he's going to be right in front of you. You get a shifty back, you're going to have to break down and watch the hips, or you'll get a speed back that can run by you. But it's those backs that can do all three are the ones that are dime and dozen.
And so rare.
They're so rare, and they're special, man, and they're super special, and it's hard to find. And for him to be that back in the 1960s and not miss a game in 9 years is a testament and to his durability and the hard work that he put in the off season, along with everything else he had going on, and he had the shoulder.
He spent most of his post-career in Los Angeles. Was he a presence there at all? I mean, I know he started the American and was very big for a long time against gang violence. And I know, and probably before you were born, but in the 80s particularly, and even into the 90s when gangs were really, really taking control of Los Angeles, he was out front. He would go to these city streets, and he would speak to these gang members and tell them there's a different way. Did you ever remember him being a presence or seeing him or anything like that?
Yeah, like, 'cause I remember the last show I spoke about the area that I lived in, and that park was gang infested. So he actually came to one of our football banquets and brought bikes and things for the kids one year. And just me being a little kid, snotty nose, I just didn't understand the importance of, I was standing next to a legend at the time. But yes, he came to our banquet, he spoke, brought gifts and things like that. And just to see like a legend and like somebody to look up to, and like he made it out, why can't I? Just the motivation and things like that. So that's the one encounter I had with him. I was young at the time, but I do remember that happening, coming to our sports
banquet. That would leave a mark on a young guy. Well, what did he mean personally to you?
Well, what he did. Well, first of all, one of my first memories of Jim Brown is seeing the movie The Dirty Dozen. I love that movie.
Did you know he was a football player playing?
I can't remember at the time if I knew it. I mean, obviously the movie came out before I was born, but I remember watching. My dad wanted me to watch it when I was a kid, and so I must have been like 7, 8 years old. And I think the movie came out in I don't even remember exactly what year. 67.
60.
I was going to say 57.
Yeah, it was after he retired.
I think it was 67 that the movie came out, and I remember watching it in the late 70s. As a young kid. And I loved it. And it had an incredible cast. Charles Bronson, Lee Marvin, Telly Savalas.
And he was good at it.
He was great.
You would never know that he was a football player turned actor.
No, and for those, I'm sure you young guys, have you seen it? Have you guys, any of you guys seen it?
I've seen it.
Dirty Dozen?
Watch it.
Watch it. It holds
I have
up.
to watch it.
Yes, it does.
7, whatever years later.
It's a classic. It's a classic.
50-something years later.
Yeah.
I watched it, I don't remember exactly when, but sometime in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies that to this day, if it's on, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to watch the rest of this movie.
Yeah.
And one of the best parts is the scene, I won't say what happens exactly, but there's a scene towards the end where he's got to run and drop all the grenades.
Yeah.
And you see, and it's like so cool.
And you're like, okay, when Tom Cruise runs in his movies, you're like, okay,
right.
You just lost me.
Yeah, right.
Because his running style is so goofy.
Yeah,
but when Jim Brown, in that scene, I remember thinking, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's clear to see now why he was the best at it in the world.
It was so cool. And then, obviously, players often, these days you're seeing players speak up a little bit, but with the civil rights movement, the Cleveland Summit, with him and Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Muhammad Ali protesting the Vietnam War and fighting for civil rights, that had to be so huge to people when you see these guys who essentially put their careers on the line to say, we're having a successful life and we have to do more for our community.
Right.
When so often people can be selfish, but these guys all said, hey, we got to do it. And that was obviously extremely impactful.
It had a big impact on society at that time. And Cleveland is entrenched in a lot of that history. That meeting happened here. You saw Carl Stokes' name on that list, Muhammad Ali, Lou Alcindor. When they were giants at the time, they were their sports, their respective sports. And they came together for a bigger and common cause. And obviously that kind of propelled him as the civil rights leader that we knew him to be later. For me, it was, I've never seen him play. It was just, I heard stories through my dad. I'll never forget the first time I interviewed him. He was at ESPN, and I had no idea that he was an ESPN watcher. The first thing he said to me, I was going to tell him, Mr. Brown, my dad was a massive fan of yours. You were his favorite player. Yeah. I couldn't even get that out of my mouth, and he said, and he talked so low and almost in a whisper, and he just said, young man, I want to thank you for representing Cleveland the way you do.
That's cool.
And I was just frozen. I didn't even get out of my mouth that, you were my dad's favorite player.
Yeah.
So we did the interview, cordial goodbyes. I met him sometime later, and I said, I'm going to make sure I tell him this time, because my dad asked me when I interviewed him, my dad was still alive, he said, did you tell him that I was a big fan of his? I said, Dad, he threw me off my game, and I never got to, but the second time I did, and every time I would see him after that, he would say, how's Dad? He just remembered that I had told him that he was a big fan of his. And when I interviewed him a couple of years ago, I told him that my dad had passed. He said he was sorry, wanted to know how old he was. I told him my dad was born in 1938. I think Jim was born in 37. I think he was born a little before my father. But for me, it was just that connection. And even though Dad was gone, every time I would see him, I would have that connection where I would be able to tell him a story or two that my dad told me about Jim and those great Browns teams. And I think if you go around Cleveland, one of the things that we've really all experienced over the last couple of days are people telling stories about Jim Brown, watching Jim Brown play. We, having never had the luxury of watching him play live, we just have seen the NFL films and everything else, and we know how great he was there. But it would have been really cool to have watched him for a game or for a season to see his total
Speaking of that,
impact.
Jay, literally in the last 90 seconds, the Browns just tweeted out, don't take it, Steve, the 5 best plays of Jim Brown's career.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm watching it as I obviously not old enough. You weren't old enough. Boogie, I'm not sure if you've seen these. Do you want to take these full? We'll watch them and
I'd
we'll
love
comment
to.
on them?
Yeah, I would love to. I've probably seen all of them in NFL films that I've watched on Jim Brown. I've seen an incredible amount of his highlights through the years, but I'd love to see what the Browns consider their top 5.
All right, so this is, I'm going to take it, not this one, Steve. I'm going to switch it, take it live as soon as it goes. These are the 5 best plays of Jim Brown's career by the Browns.
Wow. And they count them down 5-1.
Yes.
All right.
And your mics are live, so talk through it.
This is everything we talked about in those 3. Physical, can make people
I mean, it takes a team to bring them down.
He just displayed all 3 attributes right there in that one clip. Shifty.
Okay, this is number 5.
Okay.
The pulling guard play.
Shifty, physical.
Broke
and now
about
he's
3
going to
tackles
Now he
there.
runs away. Now he's gone.
Yeah, now I don't think anybody's going to keep up with them.
And those guys both had an angle on
They
it, too.
both had
did.
an angle.
Yeah.
He outran 2 angles.
And this guy's after he already had massive contact at the line of scrimmage and knocked
right.
3 guys off their feet.
All right.
That's a fullback
way.
dive. That play's supposed to go for 3 yards.
You don't understand how tough that is, having no momentum. That's why running backs start off 7, 8 yards in the backfield so they can see and have vision. He's right behind the guard.
That's incredible. It really is.
Good job by the Browns for tweeting this out, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the most film
wide
I've
side
ever watched
sweep.
in black and white ever.
Yeah.
It's like I Love Lucy.
Look at his vision,
The
too.
elusiveness.
Knowing exactly where he has to go.
You know the coach in me. Ball security, ball security.
Yeah, he's got it in the wrong hand.
Well, the
ball security.
first 2 was about power. That one, he didn't even get touched.
Look how different the passing game is now than back in the day.
I don't know how much running backs were used as pass catchers
No,
back
not
then.
that
Not a
much.
lot, Bull.
No, his last year he had 4 receiving touchdowns, which was, I think, the most of his career.
Well, that's why it's such a huge deal. Now everybody wants a running back that can give them that third
Right.
dynamic out of
Sure.
the backfield.
All right, here's number 1. Oh, this is a catch, too.
Downfield pass. Oh, okay.
So he caught it like 10 yards in the backfield.
1 guy touched him. 2,
No way.
3.
No.
The distance.
Do you know how demoralizing that must be for the defense? I'm just imagining me out there chasing.
And did not get caught either.
Snow on the sidelines. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And just stretch afterward. Okay, yeah.
That's thanks to the Browns for tweeting that out. I think I hope that's well shared and well viewed by folks that didn't see him, because the one thing that we all have it in us. You've said before, I don't know what your line was, but anything before blah 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 in sports doesn't count. I don't know what your line was.
Well, I mean, it depends on the sport.
Yeah.
I basically ignore anything that happened before integration in a sport.
Right.
Because
Like,
those
okay,
stats
Babe
don't
Ruth
matter
was
to me.
great, but he did it all against white guys.
Yeah, right,
you know?
exactly. I need, if there's no diversity in your sport because of
and that's
racism,
fair.
then
But you know what? The one thing about that is we all tend to be like, we remember our eras.
Right.
And I love listening to young guys debate like the GOATs. And they're like, I'll always interrupt and say, guys, those might be the GOATs of the last decade. But you do realize that sports started before 2010. But in their minds, they didn't.
Right,
Because they weren't watching
That's
that.
the thing I always like to say, like when people bring up the GOAT in basketball, it always starts with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And I'll say, in my mind, it's Kobe, because with my eyes, that's who I see. And I feel like I would be lying if I said it's Michael Jordan. I never went back and watched
But
him
you
play.
preface it properly. You say, for me, because you've said that on the show before.
Yeah.
You're like, look, I know there were a lot of greats before them, but there will be, so even the Michael argument, when I would have that argument as a young guy in my, in 1995, 1996, my dad and his buddies would hear that and they would look at him and say, isn't that cute? Kid doesn't even know about Wilt Chamberlain.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Or Bill Russell.
So there are eras, but the one thing that I will say about Jim Brown, because it is really hard, like even the game of basketball, when they're doing these set passes, the chest passes, and all of that, it was a different sport. But football, by and large, hasn't changed a ton in philosophy. Granted, it's a passing league now. It was once a running league.
Yeah.
But the running concepts are similar. And when you watch that clip, that's great today. That's great in 1962. That's just greatness. And it does transfer. It really does.
I mean, I do think that the talent, I think Jim Brown played in an era where he was just head and shoulders more talented than a lot of the other players in the league. And top to bottom, there's more talent now. However, I do think Jim Brown would have translated in any era as a great player. I believe that.
I do too.
Whereas I'm not so sure about some of these like quarterbacks from the 50s and 60s. Would they have translated?
Yeah.
But a guy who's a great back in those days when, because playing quarterback in those days was so different. But running back, it's different now. But in a way, it's easier being a running back now than it was then.
Right.
As opposed to being a quarterback now, it's just so much more responsibility.
Yeah, back then the game plan was to run the ball.
Yeah, right.
You
That was the
you
only-
could
that
mix
was
in
the
the
only game
pass to
plan.
keep them honest.
Right.
But today it's the other way around. You pass the ball, and to keep them honest, you mix in a few runs.
Yeah.
And the sport has definitely changed. But I believe that if you could time shift Jim Brown to a 24-year-old this year and put him in the NFL, I think he'd lead the league in rushing. I do. I think he'd be that good.
He's Derrick Henry's size, just so people out there to put in
But
comparison.
faster.
Yeah, he ran faster, but he's listed at essentially the same size as Derrick Henry.
Right.
So it's not like we're talking about
He's
a
as
6'5" center.
tall as Derrick Henry?
Well,
6'3", 250.
And Derek's I think in Derek's 6'4".
6'4". So yeah,
Yeah,
like
so,
I'm
I
saying,
mean, they're
essentially
close.
the
They're
same
essentially
size.
Man, I didn't realize they were only
But,
an inch apart.
And
height-wise.
too, you could tell when he's standing there in the uniform too. Like, now you're right. A lot of
Yeah.
these guys went home in January and they worked at the drugstore.
Yeah.
For 8 months.
Right.
And the training regimens were nowhere near what they are now. They, the teams didn't
Right.
have these huge workout facilities. They didn't meet in May. They didn't have all these mini camps and all of that. You said goodbye probably with a pack of smokes in your car and drove your car
Right.
back to Kansas City, and you took a job as a substitute teacher for for part of the year.
But he was ahead of his time. I
He
mean,
was.
There's no doubt about it. But I think there are some, not a lot, but I think there are some players in the 60s and the 50s that would have translated in any era. And to me, he's probably number one of all sports.
Yeah.
Definitely,
For me.
because do you know how hard it is when a team knows you're running? Because that's all you can do is run the ball, and you're still dominant. So that's why, to me, if he was playing in today's game, he would be an all-pro. And like we said, he has all three phases. He can run away from you, he can run through you, and he can make you miss, which would translate in today's game where we're playing in so much more open field space. He's the blueprint of what you look for in a running back.
he's the cheat
Back
code.
then in the 60s, right now in 2023.
Not to mention the
which won't
toughness
change.
of never missing a game, the intelligence, the vision. I mean, he
the
really
vision
had it
was-
all.
You mentioned the toughness. Just imagine with all the sports regiments and the sports medicine, how much has improved since
Yeah,
then.
right. That's
So for
true.
him to be able to do that and not miss a game
That's
in the
true.
60s, just
Yeah.
imagine.
I know.
Yeah, they
Right.
have a lot more
Ju-
things
yeah.
now to keep you healthy and to make you better when you're
Yeah.
not,
So-
and to get you back there out on the field. The one thing that is impressive to me too is my dad used to tell me how he said, imagine that you're the star of the game every game, and the team that you were playing spent 6 days trying to figure out how to stop you, and they still couldn't.
Right.
He was the focal point of every defensive game plan in every game he ever played in.
College
Yet
and
he
pro.
still averaged 100 yards. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged over 100 yards per game in 7 of his 9 seasons, which is and obviously for his career.
his career, he
but
averaged over.
But even in an individual
Right.
season basis, 7 of 9 years he averaged over 100 yards.
It's
That'll probably won't
absolutely
be done
insane. I
again.
know we have Leroy coming up in a couple of minutes. Is he on yet?
He is. Let me do an ad read. We'll bring him in.
Okay.
If no one else has anything to add.
Nope. I was just going to say, we haven't yet talked to what he meant to Cleveland. We can save that because I'd like to get to Leroy if he's here.
Yeah, we'll get to Leroy, but I want to remind everybody that Boogie's joining us today. Boogie, a defensive start for the Pittsburgh Maulers. If you want to check out great USFL action, $10 or less tickets, USFL.com. Check him out to see elite stars like Boogie Roberts and some other guys. Boogie also had 8 tackles, 2 for a loss, and a sack this week. So shout out to Boogie, who was named
2
to the
for a loss.
mid-season USFL Defensive Team of the Year. I don't know what the exact award was called, but he's named to the mid-season watch list. So shout out,
Congrats,
Boogie.
brother.
Appreciate you.
Making noise down there.
Yeah, and this just leads into what I want to say. With me doing this show, shout out to Jim Brown. I don't think people understand how hard it is to translate from being an athlete to doing something different
Right.
and being good at it. So for him to open the door and pave the way to showing you're more than just an athlete, to allow me to sit in this chair today and still take care of my business on the field. He's a trailblazer, and
That's right.
I wouldn't be here without him. I also do acting, following in his footsteps as well.
Nice.
So he's amazing. I just hope to have half the career that he did. So thank you guys for all the acknowledgments.
No,
We got to get a
absolutely.
couple more wins. We got to keep going.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll be.
The offense has got to pick it up. Your
Yeah, they
defense
do.
is
You
doing
know,
the job.
But we're a team. We just got to keep keeping them afloat until
Yeah.
they get things going. It's our job to not give up any points. So We still gave up a couple, which is way too many. So we'll keep going, and I appreciate you guys for having me and allowing me
And the
to.
division's still tight, even though you 2-4.
Oh yeah, we're one. The team we play this week, the Philadelphia Stars, we already own the tiebreaker over them because we beat them already. So if we win on Saturday, we'll be right back there in the playoffs.
Very good. All right.
And with that, our own personal running back, the one, the only Leroy Hoard.
Leroy.
Hey,
Wow,
up,
he's
Leroy?
got a different
What's up,
background.
fellas?
I almost didn't recognize you with
no.
that new background, brother.
No, it's not new. I'm in the studio.
Oh, you're at the radio station, huh?
Yeah, normally I'm at home, so that's
I got
why
you.
it's a little bit different.
First of all, it's good to see you again. We've missed you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's happening?
What's your remembrance of Jim Brown? I imagine you had a relationship with him as he was always in to watch Cleveland. Right. What can you remember about Jim?
So I had a unique situation in that every Monday I go pick Jim up and we go golfing after home games. And then when I got done with football and I came down to Florida, he would come and we would golf in Florida.
Wow.
It'd be me, him, another guy, and LT. We golf all the time.
Wow.
So I had a chance to, BS with him, have serious conversations. I loved hearing we go back and forth about when he played versus, when I played. But if you ever heard Jim Brown talk, he never really talked about back in my day, right? He never said how different things were. And I would always make fun of him because I'd say, you're supposed to be the best. You weighed more than half of your linemen. Right? One of the most important lessons that I ever learned from him, besides all the stories and just, I always wanted to know what it was like, right? I think today we don't realize because we kind of just brush over how difficult it was to be an African-American athlete back in those days. And so I always like hearing stories, from people that actually went through it. And it kind of just made me aware of what life was like. And he would say, there's something, if you're going to play a running back, you can never do. Don't ever let the defense think they got you, right? Because it gives them energy. He say, no matter how hard you get hit, no matter how much they talk trash, you get up and keep going about your day. And eventually it'll catch up to them. And so that was kind of, my attitude when I played, and people would talk trash, push up off of me, do various things. And I would say, see me in the fourth quarter because I'm gonna still be here. Let's see if you can still do this for 4 quarters. But always fun talking to him. He was one of those guys that if you ask him a question and you wanted to know the truth about it, he was your guy. If you didn't want to get your feelings hurt or you didn't want to be insulted, then don't ask Jim an important question because he's going to tell you like it is. But I appreciated that. I never had a problem with that because I knew it was coming from a good place. And I think that's the thing that when he was around the Browns camp or he talked to anybody, he would have a conversation with anybody, right? But you had to know that if you were out there and you wasn't doing what you need to do, he was going to let you know.
Hey, Leroy, obviously when he retired, he was getting into movies. We talked about Dirty Dozen before, and he was very much involved with other big-time athletes at the time in the civil rights movement. But he was still at the top of his game when he retired. We talked about it before. I mean, he had 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns in his last season. Over all the years that you talked with him, my guess is no, but I was wondering, did he ever regret retiring when he did, or just he had too many other things he wanted to do, I guess?
It wasn't even that. He just said, I'm ready to do something different.
Yeah.
you got to respect that because, you know, it's easy for us to look through somebody else's situation and tell them what they should do, right? Sure. Oh, you could have played 4 or 5 more years. Really? Because maybe Jim felt like he couldn't, right? We don't know what that man was thinking.
Sure.
And so you just kind of respect that. He went on to do other things. He went on to be active in the community and things like that. I just wish that people had an opportunity to get to know the side of Jim that I did, because there ain't a picture you don't see with Jim Brown where you go, that dude is still terrifying. And I had to do my squishy ball before I hooked up with him because, you know, he was going to squeeze the hell out of your hand. I was like, I ain't going here I ain't going out here. I ain't going to here soft. So I did a couple. I squeezed that. We stare at each other and give that look at him. Yeah, like you had to. It was something else. But when you spend 4.5 hours riding in a cart and playing golf with somebody, and we would play every Monday. Like I said, every Monday. So we talked a lot. I remember one time we went golfing, right? So they leave us a cart. I go pick Jim up. We go to golf course, the cart be there. We get out, we start playing. We both hit a ball on the front tee. He get out and walk. Now I'm hitting on the gas. I'm going, because he ain't walking fast. I say, Jim, get your butt in the car. We ain't got all day. He said, I'm trying to exercise. No, you're not. So, and it was cool because, like, I had more a personal relationship than a football relationship, right? Because we did other things. And then when it came down to football, if I wanted to know anything, I asked him. But I think he was there less about football and more about a way of life, more about helping young men get through the sports and life, and, you know, just how difficult it could be for either us or anybody from that standpoint.
Leroy, nice to meet you. Boogie Roberts here. I just wanted to
What's
know.
What's happening, man?
A lot of athletes, they just retire and sell off into the sunset, you know, enjoy retirement. We don't hear from them again. Why did it mean so much to Mr. Brown to become an activist and do so much for the community after his post-playing days? Like, why did that part have such a hold in his heart?
I would say for the same reason why Muhammad Ali felt that way, the same way Kareem felt that way, the same way all the Bill Russell, they all felt a need because they had that platform. See, now there's more athletes and more musicians that have a platform. We got social media. We have everybody is clamoring to hear what these athletes and stars want to say. And so there's more of a platform. Back then, nobody really cared about what you had to say, so you had to stomp the door down, right, and make yourself heard. There's a difference. There's a difference in people wanting to hear what you have to say and making yourself heard. So collectively, a lot of the athletes back in those days made themselves heard. You know, they supported one another with, you know, the Muhammad Ali situation. You know, they all felt that they had an opportunity to let people know what was going on in our community and try to do something and be champions for that cause. So times are different, you know, back then. Now, I would say that, you know, when guys retire, everybody's not looking for that next best thing, right? I know for me, it took me a few years just to survive football, right? I had to get my mind right. I had to get things in order. I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And so it wasn't that it wasn't a plan. It's that when I decided to retire from football. I just didn't show up. I just stopped going. Like they say, hey, where are you? I say, no, I'm done. It was no big, announcement or anything like that. I just had enough. My body wasn't ready. So I didn't know that it was going to come like that, but I had to, adjust my life and accordingly.
Did he help you through that, Leroy?
I mean, if you mean taking my money on the golf course, then no. Now, keep in mind, he can still play. But it wasn't a matter of helping me. It was just like once I made that decision to not play anymore, then that means you open yourself up to doing something else.
Yeah.
Right? The first thing I wanted to do when I stopped playing football is get healthy. And when I tell you with the things that were done in my body, it took me 3 years.
Wow.
Just to be able to be reasonably healthy. So when you talk about, okay, I retired, and then it took me 3 years to get to where I could get up with a reasonable amount of pain. Then I take that next step, right? Make a decision on what I'm going to do next. Now, the one thing I'll say, contrary to most people, before I was healthy enough, I could always talk. So I just kind of matriculated onto that. And next thing you know, my only regret now is that I don't charge you guys by the word. I'd be rich.
We couldn't afford it, brother.
We couldn't afford one Leroy answer if he was charging by the word.
Yeah. The show would be bankrupt.
That's also a testament to how special he was to have that smooth transition, to be able to go from football to something that takes a very special
now, keep
person
in mind,
to be able to do that.
I would say this, like, there's a different level of star there too.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like, I knew Jim Brown the person, but the rest of the world saw Jim Brown as an icon, as a star, both on and off the golf course. Off the football field. So from that standpoint, he had the luxury of being able to leave football and go into something like that.
Sure.
Right? I wasn't there. So I'm not going to even act like, why couldn't I do what Jim did? Because I wasn't Jim Brown.
Leroy, tell us something that would surprise us about Jim Brown, the man.
That, contrary to popular belief, he wasn't always so serious. Right?
Did he have a good sense of humor?
He laughed when something was funny, but you still, look, Jim Brown was still Jim Brown. And you can imagine, how would you have a conversation with Jim Brown? Everybody was like that. Even though I might have had a different relationship, right? To make him chuckle was like an accomplishment.
Absolutely.
I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah.
But it didn't mean he didn't have a sense of humor. It just seems like you have to understand, this man had to carry himself a certain way because of how he grew up in the era that he played football. So he always had to carry himself a certain way as kind of the person that everybody looked to, right? So he never really, he always was a little more on the serious side. But it didn't mean that.
He was intimidating as hell.
Yes. That was the craziest thing. The first time, I'm like, listen, there's two people that I was starstruck by. Jim Brown, but then I got to know him and that kind of went away, right? There's nothing like going to Browns camp and going, that's Jim Brown. No, dude, that's Jim Brown, right?
Right, yeah.
And the other person was Gale Sayers.
Wow.
And the reason why is, as a kid, that was the first time you actually saw a movie with real football footage, and Brian saw.
Yeah, you're right.
And just to kind of hear that story and see that story was incredible. So when I got a chance to meet Gale, I was speechless.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wasn't speechless with Jim Brown because he always made you feel welcome, right? He didn't shun away from anybody's conversation. So he always made you feel comfortable, even though he would maybe be considered a little more on the serious side. And I didn't hold that against him because guess what? I don't know if any of us as black athletes could have lived the life that those men lived in those days and still be able to perform in this world, right? Like, there's so many other things that, imagine being the best player in the NFL, you go to a hotel and you got to stay in a different hotel. You better than anybody that's staying in the good hotel, you got to go stay in the blacks only hotel.
Wow.
So I've never, when all these guys talk and you hear them talk and they say, oh, it's old school or whatever, I've never held that against them because I have no idea, and none of us have no real idea. Even if they tell you the story, you have no idea what it was like growing up in those times.
Leroy, last thing on a lighter note, you mentioned movies, right? Jim Brown and Lawrence Taylor, who you played golf with all the time, both were in Any Given Sunday. How did they not get you a spot in there?
Was it 99, wasn't it? They come out, what year did they come out?
I don't remember
That
offhand.
sounds about
Somewhere
right,
around
late
there.
90s. Yeah, you're probably right.
Because we were still playing football.
Wow.
That's fair enough. We needed you in there, Leroy.
I do need to see Leroy in a movie.
Yeah.
Tell me this man couldn't act.
100%.
Tell me this
maybe
man
we
could
get
not
one
act.
going.
Yeah, let's
Boogie,
do it.
yeah,
Maybe we do a
Boogie's
short, maybe we do a
dabbling in
short
some
film or
acting, too.
something. Hold on now, yeah.
Yeah. Leroy Hoard,
I'm
Boogie
in for
Roberts.
it.
Yeah, you got the face for Hollywood, bro.
Hey, you got the face for radio.
See, I was complimenting you. I was not being sarcastic. I was actually being honest.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my bad.
When I first
Oh, yeah. See, I know. Because we take so many jabs at one another, he thought I was kidding. I'm not kidding. Like, tell me that man couldn't play
He definitely could.
any role that you want him to be funny, he'll be funny. You want him to be intimidating, he can do that.
I can see him being a Marvel
You
villain.
want him to be
villain?
Marvel
Yeah,
villain.
Marvel
Oh, yeah.
And he's come
can see
back,
it,
I got a face for radio.
When I first heard that joke, I didn't really get it. And then I said, I'm like, wait, radio, you don't see him.
Yeah,
Like, wow,
exactly.
Wow.
Thanks, Leroy. I love you, brother.
Wow.
I love
See
you,
you,
man.
Leroy.
Come on,
Jay, you look good.
Come
Jay,
on,
you look
Jay.
good
know
to me,
I love
Jay.
You, man. You know I love you. You know
I know,
I love you.
and you're still my favorite.
Jay, you look good to
Yeah.
me. Don't let it.
I'll listen to Boogie on that one. Leroy, it's great. It's great having you on.
Thank you, Leroy.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys.
We enjoyed the insight. We really did.
All
Oh,
right.
by the way, before we
All right, brothers.
if we were to add up all of the golf bets between you and Jim, are you plus or minus against him?
Y'all want to hear another golf story?
Yeah, we got time.
So let me show you why Jim is intimidating. We were playing at a golf course in Miami, and the 9th hole is a par 3, and Alton Road is to the right of the 9th hole. Jim hit his ball. It goes to the right. We can't find it. Me and LT hit our ball. We're somewhere around the green. We look up, and Jim is over two-lane roads taking a practice swing to hit his ball out of somebody's front yard. LT say, Jim, that's out of bounds. And Jim say, I don't see no stakes. And he just kind of strong. He just kind of deboed the situation. So we basically let him hit a ball across two-lane highways.
Oh my God!
Over the street onto the green because he's strong-armed
Lion
us.
3.
No, he ain't take no drop.
He didn't take
He
a
ain't take
stroke.
no penalty, nothing.
Did he
They
hit
say
the par putt?
The street is out about. No, he made par. That's not the point. The point is he strong-armed us into thinking that he could drive across a highway to go hit his golf ball because there wasn't no white stakes.
Leroy, could you imagine the owner of that house seeing somebody, probably for the first time in the entire time he's lived there, swinging a golf club in his front yard, come
And
flying
it's
out
Jim
the front
Brown.
door to chew him out, and it's Jim Brown. Never
It
mind.
ain't happening. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, even as one of the nicest guys I've had the pleasure of talking to, he was still intimidating.
Yeah,
We all know that. Everybody,
had that
you
scowl
ain't
on
never
his
seen a
face.
picture. You've never seen a picture of Jim Brown where you didn't say that man looks terrifying.
Yeah, that's true. That
Great
was
story.
part of his natural DNA
Amazing
makeup.
story.
That's great. I'm glad you told it, Leroy. We'll talk soon, man.
See you, Leroy.
All right, brother.
See you
Later.
Leroy.
Have a good one. All
That
righty.
is pretty good.
Oh, man.
That is, and who's going to argue with him? I'm not going to make him take the penalty stroke.
Nobody.
Jim
No
Brown.
way.
You'd think if anybody would argue, like Lawrence Taylor's pretty intimidating too.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's like one of the most intimidating. Like if
Probably
you-
the greatest offensive player and the greatest defensive player, and Leroy.
Yeah. I know.
What a group.
The greatest offensive player, the greatest defensive player, and the greatest talker. The three
All in
goats
one- yeah.
all
That's
in one.
right.
It is 12:05 real quick, and that means it is officially the lunch hour of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And it's a great time to remind everybody that the Calling Compies Championship is coming to the famous Firestone Country Club on July 12th through the 16th. There is fun, family-friendly events all week long featuring a brand new fan zone experience with free attendance for kids and concerts every night. I promise you there is something for everybody. You can learn more at colleaguegolf.com. We're going to start to put a bow tie on our Jim Brown conversation. We're going to do our top 5 running backs of all time, get some viewer comments, but we have to start here. What do you guys think the Browns should do for the upcoming season, if anything at all, to honor Jim Brown?
You got an idea, Bull?
Yeah, I think they should do multiple things. There should be a 32 on the helmet, in my opinion, and 32 in the middle of the field.
That's what I think, too.
The Browns, in my opinion, in the Jimmy Haslam era, have not done a very good job honoring the greats of the franchise.
Well, they bring them back. They bring guys back.
Sometimes, but I've talked to some players off the field. I'm not naming any names, obviously.
Right.
And there's been, and I've said this to one member of the Browns front office. The guys have said, you don't always feel welcome.
Yeah.
And I think they've gotten better the last couple of years, but they better do this right. Like,
they
how many
can't
times
mess
has
this up.
Washington been crushed for how they screwed up Sean Taylor things?
I know.
This has got to be done right. On the helmet, on the field. And the Browns this year need to play with the heart of Jim Brown because they haven't done that in a long time. Yeah. And they need to play with the toughness and the fight and the heart that Jim Brown had. And putting it at 32 right in the middle of the field and on the helmets, that would say something.
I want the helmet at midfield with the 32.
Yeah.
I don't know if the league's going to allow that. I think there is a rule that it either has to be a logo or the shield.
That sucks.
If that's the case, I would change the logo.
Yeah, change the logo. Screw it.
I would literally change the logo to 32.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this yesterday, and I don't know that it'll be a rallying cry for the team because the team, although they knew him, I met most, if not all, of the players had met him. They don't really, unless they're real students of the game, they probably don't understand the impact he had. You honor him by dedicating the season to him, and you go kick the league's ass.
That's it. Yeah.
Every single week. You play like it's your last down, your last game, and you bring back to this city the honor it had when Jim led the way. That's how you honor him.
Yeah.
You go play your ass off and you win. Simple.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. There should be a 32 on all the helmets. There should be a 32 on a helmet on the middle of the field. Stop trying to get cute with elf logos and new dog logos.
Yeah.
Just win.
Yeah.
Just win.
That's right.
And everything will take care of itself. What about you, Boogie? How do players look at that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say I would like to take a delayed game, maybe every home game.
Oh, wow.
And then have the PA guy announce, like, we're taking this for Jim Brown to get the crowd, showing their appreciation.
Wow.
That's something that I
So
feel,
their first offensive play, just have
Either that-
everybody stand around and maybe play a video on the Jumbotron.
Every home
They're not
game.
going to do it every home game.
they probably won't, but
Because your first series, you're first and 15 to start.
But also the other team, to honor him, can decline that penalty.
Oh, that's interesting.
They don't have to accept the penalty.
Oh,
they
that's
can
really
go out. They
interesting.
can go out
He is
with,
right. They don't have
yeah,
to
no,
accept
that's
the delay of
interesting.
game.
They can go out with 10 players, maybe.
That's really
in the
interesting.
huddle.
I like
You know
that
what I'm saying?
idea. 10
that
players.
incorporates the other team showing respect for what he's just done for the game in general, not just the
No, I
Cleveland
like
Browns.
that.
So,
That's really smart.
you get what I'm saying? Also bring his wife out maybe for the first home game and just give her a moment of silence. Hopefully she's done grieving at the time.
Right.
So just little things like that alongside with the logos and the patches, just something that would be more memorable.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
I mean, he was the first guy. He paved the way not only with his civil rights work for young black men in America to, you know, and Leroy talked about what he had to deal with, like having to stay in a different hotel. Like, we know those things happened, but it's still, every time you hear it, it's hard to believe, like, that these things happened. But, like, so he paved the way and he opened doors for so many people. But he also opened the doors in a way for stardom in football. Because to that point, baseball and horse racing and boxing were all bigger than football.
By far.
Right? And Jim Brown, I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but to me it feels like Jim Brown was the first superstar in football.
Well, if you think about it, the year before the Browns, or the Super Bowl era began, the Browns won the World Championship, the NFL Championship.
Right.
And it really was coming into its own. He led the way into the Super Bowl era.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of credence to that theory that he was the runway to today's NFL.
Right.
And I can't think off the top of my head. If I say this, I may regret it. But to me, it seems like he was really one of the first stars to go from athletics to acting and do it very, very well at a high level.
I can't think of
I
a
mean,
lot of others.
maybe I wasn't alive. In my mind, as I'm trying to think of guys that have done it, many did it after. In fact, the guy that I think he's most compared to is O.J. Simpson.
Right.
And O.J. Simpson famously transitioned into acting and had a pretty damn good career as an actor too.
Yeah.
Because usually they'll just have guys do small appearances. You'll be like, oh, I seen
Cameo.
Yeah, cameo.
Yeah,
I
as
seen,
himself.
I seen so-and-so. Oh, did you see him in the movie?
Right.
But to transition and be a star in stars in multiple films is amazing.
It is. It really is. And it's a testament to, you said earlier, it's a testament to the kind of resolve that he had to be able to leave one arena at the top and immediately go seamlessly into another and have major impact.
It is so tough, especially in this field that takes up a lot of your time. You have to have a special level of dedication and discipline as an athlete to transition to another field where me being in that field now, how hard those actors work and study those lines, it's a whole nother dedication, discipline. So to be amazing at both of them, like I said, is just a testament to how special he was.
Well, to Bull's point earlier, he was just the kind of person that his drive and will to be great, not will to make it.
Right.
You know, I remember one of the things we talked about in the interview, because we sat down for well over an hour. One of the things that we talked about was he said, if I decided I was going to do something, I wasn't just going to be there.
Right.
I wanted to be the best.
Yeah.
No matter what it was, whether it was lacrosse, he's in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame, he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Right.
I asked him if he wanted to be a professional baseball player, could he have been a professional baseball player without sounding, boastful? He was like, yeah, I could have if that's what I chose to do.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
I do too.
Basketball probably too. I believe his senior year in high school he averaged over 30 points a game.
He was a freak on the basketball court.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just,
and track and field too. He won the 100. He won the long jump. He won the high jump. He did whatever he did. He won. And I just think he was one of those rare people. We all know them, that no matter what they try, they're not just good or accomplished. They're great.
Yeah.
52 films.
Yeah, wow, I didn't realize it was that
52
many.
films. That
is incredible.
That
and
is
I counted
incredible.
4 different times to make sure that number was right, and it was 52. That's a lot of damn films.
Are you sure you want to bite off this next topic?
Yeah, I spent about an hour and a half researching this yesterday. I did.
Because you know that it's one of those things, you can please some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can never please all of them all of the time.
Yeah, it's like, well, you weren't here last week. So we did some hypothetical trades.
Yeah.
For Jared Allen, just play around with the trade machine. This was Friday.
Right.
I think it was Friday, right? Bo, was it Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday.
And I have people saying it's way too much, way too little.
Right.
This team would never do it. That team would never do it. you're not going to please everybody. It's impossible in this industry. But I do like when, at least in those situations, and I think we're going to get to that same point here.
This is gutsy.
When you have people on both sides saying that's not nearly enough for a trade, you're probably in the right spot then for a trade.
Yes.
Now, this is a little different, and I'm going to argue a certain way for certain players, and you may disagree because you value something a little more than I do. But before we get to this, I think there's a clear top 4. And I think there's a tier with 5 through 7 that could be rearranged.
Okay.
So, with what we're talking about is ranking the 5 best running backs of all time.
Yeah,
we're going to do it.
This is tough.
We're going to do it. And this was not easy. Not easy at all. And we're going to do it thanks to Calling Companies Championship, July 12th through the 16th at Firestone Country Club. Check them out. More information at callinggolf.com. So
who's your number 5?
By the way, Icky Woods better be in that top 5, or we're going to be fighting.
He made the honorable mention. We'll put it that way.
It better be Leroy at number 5.
Leroy also an honorable mention. Real quick with Leroy, you know that play we watched with Jim Brown and Boogie was like, that's why running backs start 7 yards back so they get momentum?
Yeah.
That was the Leroy special for 2.5 yards.
Yes, it
was.
was.
That was Leroy's bread and butter.
Yeah, that was it.
2.5 yards into the hole, and then
2 yards.
Jim Brown takes it 75 yards for a touchdown.
2 yards in a cloud of dust.
One of Boogie's, Boogie will tell you one of Leroy's favorite quotes. He said, if you need 3 yards, I'm your guy. If you need 8 yards, I'm not your guy.
No, I think the quote was, if you need 1 yard, I'll get you 3. If you need 8 yards, I'll get you 3.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
right.
He was
the man knows what he is.
Yeah,
and what he is.
No, and he truly was. He was the 3 yard guy, but
he did kind of. He
consistent.
ran in a similar style. Now, it wasn't Jim Brown, but similar stylistic runner
to
Jim Brown. Physical, initiated the contact, and you could definitely see there.
He left his mark on defense.
Not afraid.
We call that 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yeah, that's the good old days. Okay, who's number 5?
All right. So 5 and 6 came down to 2 people, in my opinion. And I gave the edge to Adrian Peterson over Eric Dickerson for the longevity nod. The slight longevity. These two, if you wanted to tell me that Eric Dickerson should be 5 and Peterson 6, fine. I'm not going to throw a fit. I gave him the longevity nod. He won an MVP, 4-time first-team All-Pro. He's second on the all-time single-season rushing list behind Dickerson, who still holds that record. But he gets the nod because he's been a elite back for 9 years, a very good back for 12 years, and a serviceable running back for 14 years.
Yeah, he stuck around 15. A lot at the end.
He gets the slight longevity nod over
All
Eric Dickerson at number 5.
Dickerson had one of the all-time great seasons ever on a bad team.
Bad team.
Okay,
bad
so
team.
Yeah, Dickerson is on the cutting room floor. Who's number 4?
So like I said, these next 4, I think it's 1 through 4 in some order. You could argue different things. But with number 4, I'll with Emmitt Smith. I know he's the all-time rushing yards leader, all-time touchdowns leader. He has 3 Super Bowls, and he's the most reliable back ever. But I don't think at the end of the day he was as good at his peak as the 3 guys ahead of him on this list.
I'm okay with him at 4. I know some people have him 1.
I do not have him 1.
No, I know some do. The reason I'm okay with having him at 4 is because he had a Hall of Fame quarterback. He had a Hall of Fame wide receiver. He had Hall of Famers, I believe, on the offensive line.
2, I think.
2.
Great tight end.
And a great tight end, not a Hall of Fame, but a great tight end. I mean,
they were just a sensational team.
They had it all.
Yeah.
They had it all. Now, not to take anything away from him, he was a great player. But had he played on the 2010 Browns from 2020? Is he Emmitt Smith? Does he elevate the Browns? Probably a little.
Yeah.
But he's not.
He doesn't have the same impact because, like we said, when you're playing around a team with other great players, everything is made easier for you. So that's why I was kind of shocked he was at that spot.
In Jim Brown's case, everything was geared to stop him and only him.
That's right.
If in the 90s and you're playing Dallas and you're going to stop Emmitt Smith, you could take Emmitt Smith out of the game. There were teams that game planned him right out of the game, and they were still able to beat you with Irvin, Troy throwing the ball, and they could beat you other ways.
Yeah.
The Browns beat you one way.
Do you think
Give
he
it
has
to 32.
that cowboy effect because he played for America's team?
Probably. Yeah, I think that has something to do with it, too. We saw all of his games because they were
he
always
was great.
I mean, not to take
I'm not going to say he's not great. He deserves to be in the top 5.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put him
so I think he's appropriately slotted at number 4.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, he is the all-time NFL leader in rushing yards and touchdowns. So say what you want. That is
You're right.
An accomplishment and so on. But I don't think his peak was as high as the next three.
Okay.
By the way, I would not have had Adrian Peterson in my top 5.
Would you have Dickerson in that spot?
Why
No,
not?
no.
Oh, okay. So then you're going to have somebody. Who then do you have in your top 5 that, well, you don't know yet. You don't know yet.
I'll tell you at the end.
Yeah, save it at the end. All right, 3 through 1 here. Don't take it, Steve. Might be the hardest decision I've ever had to do.
It's really tough.
This is literally almost impossible.
That's why I asked you. Are you sure you want to do this?
No, I am. And I spent a lot of time on this. And people sometimes, the top 5s, when they're silly, we throw them together, we have some fun. When it comes to this stuff, like, I'm not going to put my name on it unless I've fully researched
That's
and
fair.
feel confident. Now, granted, I didn't see any of these 3 guys playing live. Like, Barry Sanders, who's coming up on this list at some point, I was 4 when he retired. So, like,
well,
I
Jay and I
remember.
saw Barry Sanders.
I saw Barry
and Walter
Sanders
Payton.
his entire career.
So you guys
he
can
was
chime
phenomenal.
in. This is going off highlights, stats, research, everything. And at 3 is the aforementioned Barry Sanders.
Okay.
He might be the single most talented player ever. He was untackleable. And his numbers, just flat out absurd. 6 All-Pros. He won an MVP, but he didn't have the playoff success.
And remember, the playoff success cannot be held against him.
No, in fact, he is the antithesis of Emmitt Smith. If you swapped Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders,
oh my God,
you had 5 Super Bowls.
Yes.
Because I do think Barry Sanders is more talented than Emmitt
more
Smith.
talented
and he had nobody around him.
Nobody.
They were
never had a quarterback.
Bad.
They had one good wide receiver there, Herman Moore.
Herman Moore
was really good, but they had no quarterback. They had
nobody
no
else.
defense. They had nothing.
They were terrible. They were the Browns from 2010 to 2020.
He was the entire team.
That's it.
He was the entire team, and you still couldn't stop him.
He has 6 All-Pros. He won an MVP. His numbers are absurd. His yards per carry, a little lower than you might actually remember.
He had a short career, too.
Well, and that's why. And Jim
He
Brown had a
retired.
short career,
He
too.
walked away just like Jim
He
did.
walked away,
Yep.
and that's, I think, to me, that was the differentiating factor between him and Walter Payton.
Right.
And we'll get to Walter
Okay,
Payton.
so your top 3
one
are
of the
my
top
2
in a sec, but Payton had had the longevity nod.
Right.
Barry Sanders, unbelievable in his own right. You look through, he had a 2,000-yard season in 1997 with 11 touchdowns. He led the league with 16 touchdowns in 91, led the league in rushing 4 separate times. He was unbelievable. But his yards per carry, for a guy who was as dynamic and as many big plays as he did, was a lot lower. It was only 4.4 than I thought, which I guess plays to the fact his line was terrible.
And
so he was such a hit or miss.
Barry had an interesting distinction. He was sometimes a victim of his own skill set.
Yeah.
He has the most negative yard carries in NFL history.
Yeah.
Boomer bust. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
It's not even boomer bust. And I understand where you're going with that, but Barry, he told me once in an interview, because I brought that stat up, I said, that's kind of it's a weird distinction to have. And he said, every time I got the ball, I felt like I could run for a touchdown. Even when I was pinned in, even when there was no hole, even when there was no light, I felt like I could get out of it and run for a touchdown. So he did reverse course a lot. I will say this.
His yards per attempt were an even 5.0 according to Pro Football Reference, Mike.
I thought it was higher than 4.42. I don't know where you got that number from.
Oh, I was sorry. It is 5.0. 4.3 was his last season in 1990.
Because there's only 3. There's only, I think, there's only a handful
of
guys.
He's one of 4 guys
over
that
5.
average over 5 yards for his career. That's mine.
I will say this, though, and it's hard to say because of he didn't have the team success, but if you just go on highlight films alone, Barry Sanders is the best I've ever seen.
To me, he's number 1. I agree. I would take him as the best back ever.
Listen, as you look at the highlights and you just watch what's a running back supposed to be and do, Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
He's the guy that you put into the time capsule, and if you're telling someone about football 100 years from now and what a running back is supposed to be and do, I show them Barry Sanders.
Nobody in the history of football had more jaw-dropping plays.
No one.
Nobody.
Yep.
Jerry Rice, no position.
What was his last year?
Barry Sanders?
Yeah.
He carried the ball. I mean, he was phenomenal. Carried the ball 343 times for 1,491 yards. He only had 4 touchdowns.
But what season was that?
98.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was very much like
he was 30 years old.
Like Jim Brown. He played 9 seasons.
Yeah.
Just like Jim Brown. He had 1,400 yards in 16 games, where Jim had 1,500 yards in 14 games.
Yeah.
I remember when it was my first year in Tampa, and before they played, because they used to be in the old NFC Central, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I was a baby.
Yeah, the NFC Central. Yep. And they would talk about. interview the defense about, so what's it like getting ready to play Barry Sanders? And they all said, he's our nightmare. He is our worst nightmare. And remember, they had John Lynch, they had Warren Sapp, they had Derek Brooks, they had a defense. And them trying to tackle this guy was literally like...
one mistake. If you missed one tackle,
you're done.
That's it.
Yeah, you didn't get a second chance.
I remember as in those years, it was like, because in those days, you weren't, you couldn't see all the football games like you can now. So when the Lions, now the Lions are getting good again. But for many years, it's boring to see the Lions on Thanksgiving. But when Barry Sanders was on the Lions, that was like one of the highlights of the football season. Because growing up in New York, I'm sure here too.
That was your time to see him in the primetime window.
Play that much.
That was it. You ate turkey and you watched Barry Sanders on Thanksgiving, and that was probably the only time you were going to see him all year.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay,
choose Walter Payton.
Walter Payton and Jim Brown are 1 and 2, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to give you the case for each, and then I'll tell you who I sided with at number 1. Walter Payton, the only running back in NFL history to rush for 1,200 yards 10 times. Think about that for a second. Yeah. In 10 separate seasons, Walter Payton rushed for 1,200 yards. That is stupid. Yeah. Stupid. Third all-time yards.
Now, I know this is a hypothetical, but had Jim come back, he ran for 1,500 in 14 games. He would have gone over 1,000 yards again.
Right.
Totally fair. Yeah, and obviously these are their own eras in the 60s versus the 80s. Walter Payton had the rushing record when he retired. He also had the elusive MVP for a running back. Jim Brown, on the other hand, short career, but arguably the most dominant during his era. Led the league in rushing in 8 of his 9 years. He was an all-pro in 9 seasons, 8 first team, 1 second team. He's the only non-quarterback, to ever win 3 MVPs.
Still, to this day.
To this day, the only non-MVP. So I weighed a little bit of longevity with Peyton over the pure dominance of Jim Brown, and this is not because of what happened over the weekend, but I came to the conclusion that the most dominant running back ever was Jim Brown. I couldn't get over the fact that I understand different eras, 60s. As Leroy said, he weighed more than half his linemen. But 3 MVPs, only non-quarterback to ever do that, and he was the best of the best at his position all 9 years he played. He walked away before he was done, and I know you can say the same thing about Barry Sanders, but at the end of the day, I went Jim Brown at 1, Peyton 2, Sanders 3, Emmitt Smith 4, and Adrian Peterson 5.
I would have O.J. ahead of both Emmitt and Peterson.
Oh, really? You'd have him that high?
I would.
I would say you could, because when you said Dickerson, I would say you could put O.J.
Dickerson's right there. I'll tell you a guy who gets left out all the time of these debates, but shouldn't be.
Bo Jackson?
Bo Jackson didn't do it long enough, although he would have been. Marshall Faulk.
Faulk is in that category, right there.
I feel like he gets lost.
As dual-purpose backs went.
My only beef with Peterson, and obviously Peterson's top 10 and arguably a top 5 back of all time. My only beef with Peterson is for his era, he was kind of a one-dimensional back.
Yeah.
Quick question, though. In his era, dual-dimensional backs weren't as big of a thing as they are now, though.
That's true, but
running backs weren't asked to.
But they were starting to. You were starting to see guys in
Thurman
his era.
Thomas was a dual-purpose back.
Yes.
There were a lot of backs that played in that era, but to your point, it wasn't like now every team has they want
Marshall Faulk was the two.
Marshall Faulk was
like an outlier at the time.
He was kind of the OG, really. That really did both very, very well.
Edgerrin James did both.
Edgerrin James is another one.
Gotcha. There's so many great backs. Yes. Any of those guys you can argue. I've always personally felt Emmitt Smith is a little overrated. Yeah, sure. I think Jim Brown, Peyton, Walter Payton, and Barry Sanders, you could put those 3 in any order. Yeah. I think they're 1A, B, and C. If I had to choose, I would put Barry 1, Jim Brown 2, and Peyton 3.
Did you watch Peyton Bull?
I did.
You did? Okay, you had the eye test.
What was his rookie year? I can't remember
Walter Payton,
now.
give me 1 sec.
I think Walter Payton was the purest runner of all of the running backs. In 75. The open field, Eric Metcalf was another guy that looked like a gazelle in the open field.
Yeah.
Walter Payton ran beautifully.
Yeah, he was incredible.
His form, like Jim was a tank. He was a tank.
Right.
He was a bruiser.
Yeah.
And OJ was a little like that, but OJ also had world-class speed.
Yeah.
At that time, but I just thought that Walter Payton, just in terms of his gait and his running style, I can so easily see him high-stepping with his legs just in perfect form.
Right.
He was elusive.
Amazing.
He was pretty to watch.
He was. And I was only 4 years old when Walter Payton was a rookie in the NFL, so obviously I don't remember the early portion of his career.
Yeah.
But when the Bears won the Super Bowl with him, I mean, he was their entire offense.
I thought it was a disgrace that they let Refrigerator score a touchdown and not Walter Payton.
He was angry about that.
And he should be. They scored 55 points.
Yeah, I know. That was crazy.
And
Wait,
you're
he
not
didn't score in that game?
No, he put William the Refrigerator Perry, who was their gimmick back.
Yeah.
So you probably don't remember,
he's huge, yeah.
He was massive, and he was a defensive tackle, and they used him in a gimmick offense at the goal line. And his nickname was the Refrigerator. They couldn't stop him, but when it was obvious that the game was well in hand, it was a blowout. On 3rd and goal, they took Walter Payton out of the game and put the Refrigerator in the game, and Fridge scored the touchdown. And Ditka, to this day, there are people in Chicago that have never forgiven him for that.
I did not realize that Peyton did not score in that championship
And he was
game.
very angry about it.
And he should have been.
And
he was a calm, he was a soft-spoken guy, never controversial, but he held that as you know.
I know a lot when they did the 30 for 30 on the Bears, on that team, a lot of the other players talked about that Peyton was pissed about that. And that, I mean, Jim McMahon, he had that one good year. That was his only good year, really. That was basically it. But and they had who was their great wide receiver? Willie Gault.
Willie Gault.
Yeah, I mean, that's the greatest team I've ever seen.
It was the most dominant in my lifetime, even more so than the Ravens when they had that great defense.
Yeah, obviously the
Giants
Giants
gave up 9 points a game.
Yeah.
And their offense was electric. The only thing that stood between them and a perfect season was the Miami Dolphins on a Monday night.
Right.
And it was really billed as, if any, this can the Dolphins
with Marino
keep someone else from having a perfect season, because they went 15-1 and then won the Super Bowl.
And they just in the playoffs they
blew everybody away.
Everybody.
Was it 55-7 or something in the Super Bowl
against the Patriots?
They had the Super Bowl shuffle.
Yeah.
It was that 85 Bears team was
ridiculous,
unlike anything I've ever seen.
Last Walter Payton stat before we do some internet Jim Brown memories, and we'll move on to the Guardians. How many passing touchdowns do you think Walter Payton threw in his career?
He did throw a couple. I think he did. I think they had a couple
8.
plays.
3?
Ooh, 8. I wouldn't have said that many.
3?
Bull nailed it.
8?
8.
I just guessed.
They used to do that little sprint out. They would pitch him the ball,
I'm
and he
definitely
would
rocking with Bull tonight.
and it used to be wide open.
I'm taking the Tigers. I'm throwing the extra.
Let's go Tigers. El Tigres.
Wow, he threw a number out there and just landed. Bull, you got it.
Barry Sanders never threw a passing touchdown, so now we have to, picking hairs in that debate.
Hey, there you go.
There's your.
What was his quarterback rating? What would his career quarterback rating be? 157.
Wasn't bad. Hold on. He threw 34. It was not good. He threw 34 passes in his career, completed 11. 8 of those 11 went for touchdowns. He also threw 6 interceptions.
You know what it speaks to? It speaks to how defenses played him. When he got the ball, all 11 came for him.
Right, sure.
And that left somebody wide open in the end zone.
Yeah.
You don't hold the level of competition that Jim Brown had to play against compared to Walter Payton against him in the.
I mean, I do a little bit, and that's why I think I put Barry Sanders ahead of him.
We're getting better. Our game was evolving. And things like that.
Compared to OJ?
Compared to Jim Brown. Compared to Walter
Jim
Payton.
is the. When you look at those guys and say which of these is not like the other, it's Jim because of the era he played in. All of these guys are modern era football backs.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's really hard to distinguish between those three.
Yeah, it's
and even
tough.
the other guys that we're all mentioning here. I feel like we're forgetting. Like, what about the guys playing now? Who,
I had
they
my
got to do
top
it
5.
longer.
I thought I wanted these.
What's your top 5?
Just know what I had: AP, LT, Chris Johnson, Shady McCoy, and Sean Alexander were just 5 backs.
Yeah, you're a young, and
with
that's
me,
okay.
With me,
You're a young dude.
LaDainian Tomlinson, actually, we left him. LaDainian Tomlinson is in the conversation.
He was in the.
He's in the top 10 for
extended
sure.
longer honorable mention list.
Those other guys, of the last 20 years are in the conversation.
Yeah, this is my list of
that's
guys
the guys that you
I've
saw,
seen.
that you remember, and all of those guys were electric
I
difference-making guys.
just remember that exciting that CJ2K season. Just the whole.
And by the way, now he's got a long way to go, but I believe Nick Chubb. Now again, you got to hold it against him that he doesn't catch passes in terms of the all-time list.
Sure,
but I believe he's 3rd all-time in yards per attempt. Nick Chubb.
He is
it's gonna be
one
so
of the.
hard.
He's one of 4 that's averages more than 5 yards.
Marion Motley is actually number 1 of all time, who played running back even before Jim Brown.
But was he number 60 or 61 or something? Like, don't you have to be in the 30s to even or 20s to enter this conversation?
Yeah,
I feel bad for Nick Chubb just because in today's game it's a pass-happy league. It's going to be so tough for a modern running back to crack these top 5 lists going forward because everything is so pass-happy now.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they want to see points put up. They don't want to see a dominant running back. That's why the outliers of the Derrick Henrys and the Nick Chubbs are so highly praised because you see the running back list just getting depreciated.
If I'm Nick Chubb at this point, you're the, I think, top 3 runners of the football in the sport right now.
Yeah, sure.
From January to April, or just take it all the way to camp, August, July, I'm gonna catch 250 footballs a day.
Yeah.
I'm going to run routes. I'm going to work with guys that have been great pass catching running backs in the past. And I'm gonna eliminate that as a criticism of my game.
Yeah, and I wonder. I mean, it's not like Remember in that playoff game, he did have some drops, but for the most part, he hasn't had drops. They just don't throw it to him a lot. I wonder this year, even though Jerome Ford will be there, Jerome Ford is not. I would think. I know we're talking about they're gonna throw a lot, and I agree with that. But I think Nick Chubb will have a higher percentage of plays on the field than he's ever had in his career this year.
I hope so.
And I think he'll get more passes this year. I wonder if he ends up.
I hope so.
I wonder if he ends up with a career high in receiving yards for him, which is probably not that high.
No, it'd be interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah.
We're going to get to our internet comments and internet memories. Jim Brown from our wonderful viewers and audience out there. And as always, whenever we ask the internet for responses, it's brought to us by our dear friends at PCC Airfoils. If you're looking for a job with career advancement and great benefits, well, PCC Airfoils is a leading manufacturer in Northeast Ohio. All locations of PCC Airfoils in Eastlake, Menor, Wickliffe, and Minerva are hiring for all positions starting at $18 and up, plus full benefit packages, paid time off, and a signing bonus. You can apply online at precast.com/careers to learn more. We got some text on Haymarket. We got some YouTube community comments. It's easiest to pull them in on Tagboard from Twitter, so we'll go with a couple tweets here. But this first one is from Michael and Tonse. Well, I was too young to get the privilege to watch him play the game of football. As a legendary human who was a Cleveland icon who helped unite people and build equality through athletics, he'll forever be remembered. The world lost a great man, and the city lost an icon. R.I.P. And we got 2 more here. This one I appreciated. Back in '96 when he boxed the aliens to help save the world, an iconic moment in the career of Jim Brown. How could y'all forget that? And this from the April, and she says, for me, Jim Brown, in addition to his greatness on the field, will always be remembered in one of the single funniest scenes in a movie ever.
Get you, sucker.
I don't know what movie that's from, I'm not going to lie.
I'm going to get you, sucker.
I'm going to get you, sucker. Wasn't it a parody? Was it a
it was like a spoof
film?
Yeah,
spoof.
Also, oh my God, I just forgot he was in the movie with Schwarzenegger. Oh God, The Running Man.
Was he?
The Running Man. Yes, look that up.
Well, I have to watch some Jim Brown movie. I don't know if I've ever seen him in a movie.
So remember The Running Man? It was like a game show.
Running Man. I didn't see it.
So for those who don't remember, Running Man was like in Schwarzenegger's heyday.
He was. You're correct.
Right? I just remembered it now because he said boxing, and I remember. So The Running Man, Schwarzenegger was in jail for who the hell knows what. It's like a dystopian society in the U.S. in the entire all of Earth. And Schwarzenegger, he's either going to get killed for being a criminal, or he can go on this game show where you could get killed, but if you survive, you're clear of all your criminal behavior. So Schwarzenegger goes on the show. By the way, the host of the show was Richard Dawson, who used to host Family Feud.
Yeah, Family Feud.
And the game's rigged, but in each event, you have to fight against one of the guys who try to kill the Running Man.
Right.
There are all these different characters, almost like wrestling. And the all-time champ was Jim Brown. And for most of the movie, he's in the high rollers room, hanging out with the mucky mucks. But then those guys keep getting killed, so eventually he goes down to fight against Schwarzenegger. It was pretty cool.
Wow, I like
it. I hadn't thought about that movie in a while, but he was great.
I haven't seen it, but the concept sounds fun.
Yeah.
All right, more internet comments?
Yeah.
No, those are the internet comments we got. We got so many that are coming in. It's hard to. Oh, we do have one super chat though. Anthony sent it to me. Give me 1 sec to pull it up. This is from where did he put it? Sorry. This is from Maurice Lucas. No relation to me. My birthday is your show's anniversary. I live in Phoenix, but I was born in Cleveland. My name is Herman Moore, and I went to Shaw High School. So thanks for watching, Maurice. We appreciate it.
Very
and
cool.
Happy belated birthday, about 2 weeks out. So
West Coast love.
Yeah.
yes, sir. All right. Any more Jim Brown stuff? I feel like we spent an hour 40 on it.
We've covered it all.
I think we have.
did.
Yeah.
Kudos to us. We did it. And we will miss Jim Brown here in Cleveland and around the country.
No doubt.
In some other sporting news, not a good weekend for the Guardians, guys. 3 losses to the Mets, each by 1 run.
Well, and in each of these
demoralizing
games,
fashion.
they blew leads late.
The Mets won.
demoralizing
The Mets
fashion.
won in their last 3 at-bats.
Yeah. Now, in the first game of the doubleheader yesterday, the Guardians were down. They came back, and then they still lost late
In the 8th inning.
in the 8th inning.
I mean, Stephan came in and walked the guy, gave up a home run.
Their
Boom.
pen's been a disaster.
One of the things we talked
Yeah.
about, Bull,
Yeah.
and this was one of my concerns when I went to Arizona in spring training, and I talked to the pitchers, I talked to everybody on the staff. The one thing that we were very concerned about was year to year,
You never know.
cannot replicate that kind of success.
Yeah.
It's literally like you're throwing darts in the dark. And they, as good as they were last year, they've been that bad this year.
They've been listen. Clase I'm not gonna say he's been terrible, but he's not been good.
I think he still leads the majors in saves.
Yeah,
I
but
think he's second in saves, but he already has.
But he's already blown
6
more this year than he
saves.
did.
And they've got 12 as a staff.
yeah,
12 blown saves.
I mean, he's been Karinchak's been awful. Give the grand slam to Pete Alonso on Friday night.
I think he's given up 6 or 7 home runs.
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, the bullpen's been just awful.
Yeah.
Pretty much across the board, and those are just soul-crushing losses.
You know
I mean,
what?
you had
That's
a
what
huge lead on the Mets on Friday. You let it get away.
They were up 7-2. They gave up a grand slam to tie it.
Yep.
And they end up losing. They take the lead in the 10th inning. They score 2 runs. They give up 3 runs.
It was unbelievable. And the 3 runs they give up, they had given up 1. Obviously, you had the runner on second. But then it was 2 outs.
Yeah.
And then single. And Lindor kills them. Knocks to the game-winning run on Friday. Lindor hit the home run to tie the game last night.
My son Corey was at the game Friday, and he's like, Dad,
oh,
that crowd, it felt like a playoff game.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the Mets have been struggling. They're just now over 500
Right.
with the win in game 1, I
Yeah.
think, of the doubleheader yesterday. But all of this being said, and I'm pissed. I'm telling you, I'm furious.
Yeah.
I am furious, and I'm going to the game tonight.
Yeah.
I'm furious right now. All of that being said,
They're 4.5 out.
they're not out of it. You know, you're playing in
mean,
the worst division in baseball.
I feel like every day I keep expecting to look at the standings and see them 10 out because they've lost 20 of their last 31 games. They're 11-20 in their last 31, and they're only 4.5 games out. And it's not like they were playing that great before this. Their
weren't.
season high is 3 games over 500. They were 9-6. I'm sorry. 9-6.
You're right.
And they've lost 20 of 31 since then. So
that's a problem.
Like, if you're 9-6 and you lose 20 of 31, in most cases you're
done.
double-digit games
You're
out.
done. Even if it's still May,
Right.
you're done.
But the whole division stinks.
If they were in the East, they'd be 15 games out.
If they were in the
They'd be
East,
the Twins would
Yeah.
be tied for last in the East.
that's a good point. The Twins would be tied for last.
Tied
They
for
wouldn't
last.
be 15. They'd be 14.
Okay.
Real
Even in
quick,
the
just
West,
look at-
everybody's good except for Oakland.
Well,
know.
if you look across,
Yeah.
Boogie, 1 second. If you look across the American League, there are only 5 teams in the entire American League with a negative run differential.
Yeah.
Only 5. The A's, minus 168, which is absurd. just flat out absurd.
If this
And
was
then
if this was soccer, they'd get relegated
Yeah.
to AAA.
The A's, by the way, have given, and the other 4 are the
And
AL
the other
Central
4 in the
besides
American League
Twins.
Central outside of the Twins.
The A's, by the way, are allowing 2 runs more per game than the second worst team in baseball.
Oh,
2 more runs per game. I think the White Sox are the second worst.
Well, you know what? The Sox are in for a series
Yeah.
starting tonight.
If the White Sox win the series, the Guardians are going to be in 4th place.
This is where they
Yes.
got to get hot. I'm pissed right now.
Yeah.
But I'm not throwing in the towel
No.
because why would you? Now the Cardinals are starting to play better baseball.
They've gotten
You know
hot.
what's
They
interesting?
just gave my Dodgers
The
trouble.
Cardinals, the Yankees, the Astros. There's some teams in there I'm missing.
Dodgers got off to a bad start.
Dodgers,
Yeah.
they got off to horrible starts that are now turning it around. Now,
Yeah.
Tito notoriously starts slow.
Yes.
His team, this is their trademark. And they usually get hot in June. It's time. Look, you're 2 weeks away from being in first place. you're a week away if you get red hot.
Yeah, the problem right now is, and I still think they're going to win the division. And right now they're an awful baseball team. Right now,
terrible.
This moment in time, they're an awful baseball team. They're not hitting well. They're not pitching well. They're not doing anything well.
I think their starters are throwing well.
That's the interesting thing this weekend. All 3 starters were solid or better.
Pitched well enough to win the game.
And, there's some issues in the back end of the rotation, obviously, with the injuries, but I'm fine with the rotation.
Yeah, but they've addressed that. With
Bibey's pitched
Allen
very
and
well.
Bibey.
Yes.
And when is Williams coming? Have you seen what Williams is doing?
Yeah, he's been great.
I mean,
I would think
guys can't hit him.
All right, and Bo Naylor needs to stay in the majors.
Absolutely.
This is ridiculous.
On May 18th, which I think was Thursday maybe, or Wednesday or Thursday, the catchers for the Guardians were hitless for the month.
Yeah, we were talking about that last week.
I made that whole segment on Friday.
Bull, you and I could take 66 Major League at-bats. We're going to get a hit. We're going to get a hit.
Maybe you could. I don't know.
I built an entire segment for you on Friday about that, and then you called out sick. Just so you
know.
Oh, man.
That was a bummer.
We had a whole segment.
I miss Kirkshin. Tim Kirkshin was
here. I know. He was great.
We asked him about you, too.
I love Tim Kirkshin. I was so bummed that I missed him.
Did you hear the story he told about you?
Yes. Did he tell the story about spring training when I jumped in
the batting cage?
Yeah. He was like, I don't know, Jay.
He was the one. I think it was Kirkshin who said there was a group of us. Mark Mulder from the old Royals pitcher was there.
A's.
Yeah. He said, and I can't remember, but I think it was Kirkshin started, and he goes, man, we were watching guys take BP, and the pitching machine was set at 90, and it's the kind that you don't see. It looks just like a pitcher.
Yeah.
You see the video, and the ball just shoots out. And he's like, man,
Jay, do you want to hear
Tim?
We have Tim telling the story. You want to hear it?
Sure.
It's only a minute long.
Yeah.
All right, Steve.
He underestimated me.
Take it.
Jay was a dear friend of mine. We went to we did a show in like Phoenix or something doing the Giants, and Jay still plays baseball at a pretty high level. So he jumped in against the pitching machine, throwing, it was at least 85. It might have been 90. And 90. He said, I can hit this. And I'm thinking, Jay's a good ball player. He's a good athlete. I'm not disputing. I said, I'm not sure he can hit 90. And after about 3 pitches, he hit a bullet. He hit a rocket. And I said, all right, there's Jay Crawford for you. And and I played catch with him a few times. He can throw a baseball. So it's always good to find someone who's in the business, who's actually played at least one of the games. It's not necessary to have played in order to be a good writer, analyst, reporter, but it sure helps if you have played before, if you know what 90 miles an hour looks like, and Jay Crawford does.
Jay talks about his playing days all the time, so I'm glad we got some real confirmation that he actually does know how to throw.
Jay is a dear friend of mine.
What's that?
We went to the bat.
Is baseball your favorite sport?
Oh, by far. Yeah. By far.
Jay was a professional baseball player, Boogie.
Yeah. And we opened our season Saturday with a big win, 12-4.
Oh, nice.
6 innings, 1 earned, 3 for 5 at the dish.
Nice.
Yeah,
Red
big
hot start.
win against a very good team in our. What's that?
You still playing?
Still play. Yeah.
Where?
Still play. It's Northern Ohio.
Anything down there in Canton area or no?
Yeah, we play games in Akron.
Really?
Yeah,
Patches up the arm every year.
I do. I got to tell you though, this was the first year that I should say, I didn't throw at all. You know, I just didn't. I've been doing a lot of different exercises for pitching, but I showed up, get the ball for the season opener, went 6 innings, 5 Ks. Walked 3, which is a lot for me. I do not
Terrible.
walk guys. I know. Listen,
it's honestly embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
Get off my show.
I was seriously. Now, one of them was a 3-2 pitch that was beautiful. My catcher even turned around and he never says anything. My catcher said, "Where was that?" So it should have been 2 walks, but technically it was 3 walks. But I thought my arm would be killing me because I probably threw 90 pitches.
Did you yell at the umpire on that pitch, by the way?
What's that?
Did you yell at the
umpire?
umpire?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Do you have a fan?
We are going to go out. We will
club?
shoot one of Jay's games. That's
Yes,
a promise.
you
Every
absolutely
we'll
have
go
to.
out, Mike J up and shoot one of
Do
his
you have a
games.
fan club?
It's very small. Family,
I might
family
pop up
members.
one of them games.
All right, very good.
He had
Body
one more fan
paint
before I
going.
learned he walked 3 batters in his debut.
Yeah.
Off the Jay
business.
bandwagon.
That will be.
Nuggets is
I will
out.
not walk 3 guys in a
there
game
you
the
go.
rest of the year. But that story was true, and what he left out was he said, "I'll pay for a group dinner," because there were guys that were hitting the cage that were, I'm not saying they would miss a lot, but there were guys that 90, they were swinging and missing. And he's like, there's no way you're touching that. So when they were done, it wasn't the Giants. We were at the Giants the day before. It was at the Indians. And they said, go ahead, go in there, and we'll give you 3 pitches to square one up. I fouled the first one off. I hit the second one. It was in a cage. I wish it wasn't because, and I think Tim would tell you this, my third one might have been a home run. I mean, it was completely squared up and hit to dead left center field, and it was crushed. And everybody that was in there was like, what in the hell just happened? And I just dropped the bat, walked out of the cage, and I said, Tim, we're going to the most expensive restaurant in Phoenix, and you're paying. Because it wasn't just dinner for me. He said, I'll buy the group, our whole Baseball Tonight group.
How big was that bill?
It was, I don't know, but it wasn't small because we could all eat.
Are you a big Dodgers fan?
So.
But that was your team growing up?
Yeah, that's my team now because I'm an LA guy. So
yeah,
me learning now, understanding the game more now. I'm a huge Dodger fan. Love Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and things like that. So yeah.
But you know what's Ronald Acuna is having the kind of season that you remember 30 years from now.
Yeah.
He's running. It feels like he's running away with the MVP race already.
And they got a great rookie too.
They've got a great club.
Their whole team's really good. Spencer Strider's stacked. Yeah. Real quick, one last reminder that the Lunch Drive, the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, is sponsored by Collet Companies Championship. You can see your favorite golfers at Firestone Country Club on the 12th through the 16th of July. Check them out at colletgolf.com. And Boogie mentioned L.A. He mentioned his Dodgers, but we can't end the show without giving Boogie a chance to cry about his beloved Los Angeles Lakers. Boogie,
wow.
I'm sorry, man.
I've had a terrible
bet
weekend.
on the Lakers, and it was
terrible.
not good.
Maulers getting their tails kicked. My Lakers losing. We're down 0-3. This is terrible.
You think they can even win one game?
We got to win tonight. We got to win one.
Well, both series are 3-0, right? I mean, this is a nightmare for the NBA.
LeBron's been down 3-0 3 times in his career in the playoffs, and
never won the.
He won one game.
Oh, I thought he was.
His teams are 1-3 after being down 3-0.
Their role players are just shooting. Their role players are playing amazing. Bruce Brown's playing out of his mind.
This is a team, isn't it? I mean, this is not just one player.
But the thing about it is, I think people are forgetting because of the resurgence that the Lakers have had, how at the bottom we were at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I know.
They're the number 1 seed. They're the number 1 seed.
And nobody respected them because they hadn't done anything in the playoffs before.
Right. They're the number 1 seed for a reason. So let's not get off. Let's go talk about those Boston Celtics now.
Yeah,
that's a much more embarrassing.
They're losing to an eighth seed.
But let me ask you this: is it embarrassing for the Celtics or is it impressive for the Heat? Because I have to tell you, for a team,
I think it's both.
For a team that was on the edge of elimination, they look like they can't be stopped right now.
How have you ever seen a team or a better example of how much coaching matters?
Yeah. No, I don't think I have.
We don't think of coaching in the NBA like we do in football, and it doesn't mean as much.
And as good as Spoelstra has been, oh my God,
I didn't understand in Game 2. Remember in Game 2 of Miami-Boston when what's his name, Grant Williams was talking trash to Jimmy Butler?
Yes.
At that point, Jimmy Butler just went bonkers.
Crazy.
And they never double-teamed him.
Never switched it. And that's on the coaching staff.
I don't understand that.
I kept watching it thinking, when are they going to adjust here? And they didn't. And I think
What do you make of that, Mike, as Mr. Basketball? How did they not double-team Butler in Game 2 when he's gone bananas?
So, a couple things. One, Joe Mazzulla yesterday was asked after the game.
He fell on his sword.
Have you lost the locker room? Have you lost your team? And he said, yeah. And to hear Coach.
You never hear them say that.
Admit, and I'll find the exact quote.
He said, I've got to do better. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have my team prepared.
Yep.
He fell hard on the sword.
Yeah.
But guess what, Mike? He had to. We're all seeing the same thing.
Yeah, but there's a different, the Lakers lost Game 3. They missed some shots. They came out and played. They were ready.
Yeah, right.
The Celtics were not ready last night.
Not even close.
No, they got humiliated.
2-0, going on the road, knowing you're the prohibitive favorite. You're playing an 8 seed, which, as Bull alluded to, we've said the regular season now means essentially nothing ever.
It just goes to show you that the regular season.
But to go into that scenario, knowing the adjustments that had to be made, knowing that they are essentially a one-man team with Jimmy Butler leading the show, and even though Gabe Vincent and the other role players have been phenomenal, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson.
Vincent was the leading scorer in the game last night.
But it's still Butler's the antagonist of the whole offense.
He's the guy.
To come in flat and not have your guys ready. And I stand by Boogie. I actually would love for you to chime in here. When I was playing, and I do think 99 of 100 times, it's on the players to get ready to play. Like, if you're not ready to play in Game 3 of a playoff series, that's on the players.
I don't think he meant, but I don't think that's what he meant, Mike. I don't think he meant, like, fire and brimstone, let's go. I think he meant X's and O's.
He did.
So you think he meant his adjustments weren't there?
Yeah.
But in the first quarter, when Miami came out and threw the first haymaker,
right,
that's when, in my opinion, a coach calls timeout,
get a timeout, and
rallies and says, draw a line in the effing sand.
Let's go.
We're on which side? Go. And he did not do that yesterday. He fell on the sword. Boogie, is it the same in a football locker room where it's on the players to kind of get up for the moment, or do you guys rely on the coach to almost set the scene and get you guys ready for war?
No, it's definitely the players. You know, the coach prepares you throughout the week, and you can have the same mindset and mentality of your coach, but at the end of the day, it is the players who are out there playing.
They've got to provide the fight.
They got to go out there and execute the game plan that you've worked throughout the week, because it sucks that sometimes coaches are at blame when they might have a good game plan. You had a great week of preparation. They're going into it feeling confident, and the players just go out there starting flat, but it's on the coach that'll come up and say, oh, I'll let the guys down just because he is the head coach.
Right.
But it's definitely on the players. Me being a current athlete, it's on the players to go out there and get it done.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought that, Boston is too good. They're too good of a team. They have way more talent than Miami has.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And this is, if you ever want to make because there are some that say, it's not, coaching in the NBA is a joke. In the playoffs, it's everything.
Well, that's
Who
when
do
you
you guys
really
think
see
will win the title?
Now I think Miami.
I think it's going to be Denver, but I think it's going to be a really good finals.
I hope it is, because these are eggs.
Yeah. Who you got, Mike?
I would take Denver. And to Boogie's point with the coaching adjustments, and Boogie, I hate to go back to the Lakers, but there's nothing to break down in the Heat-Celtics game. The Nuggets-Lakers series has come down to Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope hitting open shots that D'Angelo Russell and Lonnie Walker and Malik Beasley, who hasn't really played.
Those guys had
they had been hitting them earlier in the playoffs. They were hitting those shots.
Their role players are playing much better than our role players. But on the topic of adjustments, I will say that at this point, Darvin Ham has been at least trying different lineups, different adjustments, trying to.
But he hasn't got his finger on anything that works.
It's just not working. And sometimes you have to tip your hat to certain guys making threes, because we make adjustments. If we double Jokic or double, Jamal Murray, somebody's going to be open. And if their players are hitting those threes, you can't cover everybody. You have to tip your hat. And,
you do have to pick your poison and live and die with it.
Yeah, they're shooting great from the three-point line right now, and they're playing with confidence. So he's trying to make adjustments, and we've been in each of these games. We've been in the games.
You were up. Interesting. Game 2, Jamal Murray did not play well the first three quarters, and then he went nuts in the fourth quarter.
He's seen one go in, and it was like a
He's always been like that.
And then in Game 3, Jokic didn't do much the first three quarters. A lot of that was foul trouble because he was on the bench.
Right.
But then he went nuts in the fourth quarter and just put the team on his back.
Which of the teams down 0-3 has a better chance of winning a game?
The Lakers. Just because the sample size we've seen of the
just because they've been close.
The Lakers lost 3 games by a combined 20 points. The Celtics lost by 26 last night.
And I believe it was
the Lakers are at home.
But I still think the Celtics. I keep looking at this roster going, how in the hell is this happening?
I think the Celtics want to go home now at this point. That's the way it feels.
I think Jimmy Butler's ripped their heart out.
He did.
Yeah,
Jimmy
I think
Buckets,
he's
man.
ripped their heart out. So that's why I would go with Los Angeles, because we have been competitive in these 3 games. The last one, I think we were up by 1 point in the fourth quarter with 7 minutes to go. And then we had a stretch when they went on that 13-0 run, and we lost it there. But if we can just make some shots, I think we'll be okay.
Has the team ever come back from 0-3?
0. I think it's 0 and 149.
Yeah. By the way,
it's only happened in baseball.
I think we're just asking for 1 game. Just let us not get swept.
Remember in game,
keep the brooms in the closet.
Remember that, down the stretch, the last minute of Game 2, the Lakers were down 4, I believe, with 50 seconds to go, and LeBron missed an easy layup.
LeBron's been horrible shooting the ball.
And you wonder,
Game 1, he's just
will
taking threes.
Will we look back and say that was the moment where LeBron stopped being LeBron?
It could be before then. He missed a dunk.
He did miss
a dunk.
The first
was that Game 1?
Because we were up. I believe it was Game 1 or Game 2.
I thought it was Game 1 he missed the dunk.
Because we were
1
up.
was the dunk and then 2 was the
listen,
blown
we were
layup.
up 8 points at that moment, and that could have put us up 10. He misses the dunk, and I feel like the momentum just went downhill.
He has not looked like LeBron James in this series.
And then in Game 1.
he's old.
He's still 23, 7, and 12.
Yeah, listen, he's still better than most players in the NBA, but he's not He doesn't look like
now.
him
If you're looking for the Herculean ending to what does LeBron need to do?
Yeah.
Well, what he needs to do is dig out of this hole. You come back from this and win this series and then go on to win a championship by beating Miami and Spoelstra and Riley and all the hatred that exists between those groups.
Yeah.
Wow.
How about Kevin Love has a chance to win another championship?
Do you think the NBA is
Now, he hasn't played
though?
great in this series.
No, he hasn't. But he has been a factor for them.
But he's still a starter.
He was a factor for them late in the regular season and early in the playoffs.
Yeah, he starts. I mean, he doesn't play a ton of minutes, but he starts.
Do you think the NBA is mad? They were on that road to fight for 18, Lakers, Celtics.
Oh, they wanted that bad.
Do you think that?
Let me tell you, the difference between a Lakers-Celtics series and a Denver-Miami series
ratings
is a couple $100 million in ratings.
But I'm looking forward to Miami-Denver. I think it'll be a good series.
Fun.
It'll be refreshing. It'll be different. But it won't be a ratings.
What do we got in overtime, Mike?
We got the rest of the viewer questions from Friday. And Boogie will get your insight on a couple things we didn't get to on the show. So we'll see you on overtime.
Boogie on the hot seat.
Cleveland Sports Show.
Boogie on the hot seat.
Uh-oh.